Groans rippled across the training ground. Kukar. No one moved. Cadets stared, unable to trust what they'd just seen. Ark, what are you doing? Quit gawking. Get the medics. Daytona and Haytona found their voices far too late. Jin stood where he'd struck, face unreadable. Jin, you bastard. Have you lost your mind? Why swing without warning? They barked, but their eyes jittered. Had he noticed they'd planted their sister's lackey among the new faces? And how had he read the right one, cleanly taking an arm? Two problems loomed over the twins. First, they'd let one of their sister's men get maimed on day one. Punishment would be brutal. Second, if they didn't avenge him here, their prestige would crater. Rumors of Tana twins humiliated by the youngest would spread before sunset. Steele rasped, "I'll kill you. Stop clawing your way up." Jin ignored them. He faced the bleeding cadet clutching his stump. Name? Jin Runcandel. Do you know why I cut you? I do not. Why? Hey, Jin, don't ignore us. Draw again, you elder brothers, Jin said, tilting his head until his eyes met theirs. I'm speaking to Jin. What? Be quiet. If you want to fight, I'll oblige later. How dare you? After attacking our cadet. Your cadet. Haytona's hand flew to his mouth. Too late. So he is one of yours, Jin said. I cut him because he pointed killing intent at me. Silence fell a second time. In a breath, Jin Runcandel became publicly labeled as Tana faction. This wasn't a tantrum. It was page one of a Runcandel dominance game. The medics are here. The crowd split. White-robed healers moved with unhurried efficiency, long used to blood on these stones. Even pure-blood Runcandels stepped aside for triage. Jin raised his voice so every cadet heard. Listen well, Jin, and all of you. I'm Jin Runcandel. From today on, I don't mind if you come at me the way Jin did. Ambush me with a sword. Hit me from behind if I drop my guard. The cadets gaped. But understand this. If I feel even a flicker of murderous intent, I'll cut you down. Exactly like I did just now. He walked back to his spot. Throats bobbed as he passed. On the platform, Zed Runcandel watched with bright, feral interest. Jin didn't apologize. He knew this uncle. Zed admired audacity more than anyone, even father. The medics carried Jin off on a stretcher. All eyes swung to Zed, waiting for the hammer to fall. The twins looked almost hopeful. Jin Runcandel, the Patriarch's 13th. Zed's voice carried. Yes, Elder. He did not say uncle. You've done something dreadful. You dare do it in my presence. That's correct. How insolent. What? I wasn't challenging my brothers, Jin said. I was challenging you. Even the twins forgot to smile. Zed's hand lifted. Aura hissed into a slender white blade. An 8 stars trick. Speak. Depending on your answer, I may take your head. You staged a special welcome for us new cadets by throwing us into the intermediate class, Jin said. I took that as your challenge. As your attack. A flick. A shallow line opened on Jin's cheek. He didn't flinch. So you weren't offended, Zed said softly. But you were answering a strike. Yes. Then why not strike me? Because I can't win yet. If I could, I'd have cut you. Not Jin or my brothers. You don't value your life. Or you trust the Patriarch's son's status too much. Being weaker isn't a license to be abused, Jin said. And I don't think cowardice is a Runcandel virtue. Around them, legs wobbled. On what foundation did a 15-year-old stand like this? Zed was quiet for a long minute. The aura blade unraveled. So life is brief, but honor endures? Foolish. His mouth curved. And I like your foolishness. Good. You've earned the right to breathe here. He laughed, loud and clean. Remember this day, cadets. This is the core of us. This is what it means to be Runcandel. Yes, Elder. Every day is a battle. Dismissed. Daytona, Haytona, you stay. The rest out. Training begins tomorrow. Cadets filed off. The twins looked bloodless. As Jin passed, he paused. A little brother's advice, he said mildly. Think ahead. You fear our older siblings more than me today. That may change. They couldn't answer. Did that really happen? His nerve unreal. Maybe he really did kill that white wolf warrior. I'm not saying join his side, but don't make him an enemy. He's still 13th out of 13. Betting wrong could ruin us. The others are already established. Sure, but who else talks like that in front of Elder Zed? And I heard the Patriarch isn't happy with Lord Joshua. Some say the youngest could be Hush. Do you want us all dead? By nightfall, every dorm talked about Jin. The new intermediates who rose with him, Scott, Mesa, Bellup, the rest, were already dubbed the youngest division and drew senior eyes like knives. Per Jin's order, they moved in packs. If they're going to retaliate over Kajin, it'll be soon, Mesa said. Stay sharp. An hour later, footsteps stopped outside their door. The youngest division braced, ready to swing at the first trace of killing intent. Evening, juniors, someone said pleasantly. They opened the door to find upper-class cadets holding baskets, cigarettes, bottles, snacks. Not raiders, invoice. The newcomers shoved the gifts into stunned hands. Didn't know what you like, so we brought a spread. Milla smokes, Curano liquor. Cost a fortune. No poison. Why this? We're unaffiliated, the senior said. We can't jump into family war, but we can cheer for young Master Jin. They'd suffered under the Tana twins for a year, endless petty torments when no true Runcandel watched. Today's public beating of the twins man had felt like a first breath in months. We'll get out of your hair, the senior added. May your path be better than ours. Thinking. Phew. Back in his room, Jin shut the door and sagged against it, letting the tension drain from his shoulders. At last he could breathe. I thought my heart would burst. He replayed the exchange with Zed Runcandel and stared at the ceiling. Regression gave him the script and the beats to hit, but speaking them to Zed's face was something else entirely. One flicker of fear and he would have lost a limb, maybe his head, but he'd pulled it off. He'd stamped a clear image of himself into Zed's mind and every cadet's, and he'd thrown down a public gauntlet at the Tana twins' feet for control of the intermediate class. The payoff looked small compared to the risk, but Jin knew the clan too well. Here, lives were lost over trifles, and nothing was gained without betting everything. Fight, win, take the spoils. Even if every cadet were a regressor, most couldn't do what I just did. The three virtues he despised in his first life, audacity, dominance, and results, were now the ones he was closest to mastering. Gilly. Yes, young master. I've formally declared war on the Tana twins, and it looks like Anne and Mew are propping them up. Gilly froze mid-tea-wipe. She'd expected a clash for class hegemony. She hadn't expected the twins to have a patron. Ladies and Mew, are you sure? Yes. I cut down a cadet beside the twins. Turned out he was theirs. No way 2 3-stars recruit a 5-star without big sister strings. Gilly's gaze darkened. Anne and Mew were 7 stars with battlefield credentials and flags to prove it. Among Siren's 13, only 4 lacked flags. Jin, the Tonus, and little Yona. It's already good news, Jin said. If they're moving this early, they're worried. It's still wrong. You're 15. Flag bearers shouldn't meddle below their weight. It's fine. I'll turn concern into fear. With a thump, the cat by the window rolled, stretched, and lengthened into a very human dragon. What did I miss? Murakan asked. Gilly summarized. Murakan sighed. Shame I can't drop the act yet. 2 7-stars. I flicked them like dust. Why trample the only kid who could someday crush the zipfuls for them? He wasn't wrong. If Jin mastered Solderet and stayed, Runcandel could one day steamroll the Magi. For now, the zipfuls held the advantage. Only war's cost and Siren's existence stayed their hand. And they had no idea Solderet's contract sat with Jin. They'd press me harder if they knew, Jin said. I wouldn't have seen 15. Murakan snorted. Clans as rotten as ever. Might have been kinder 1,000 years ago. Gilly straightened. What now, young master? I've already struck back. I cut their top intermediate piece on day 1 and, in public, made him the twins man. And Mew will flay them for it. Tomorrow they'll show up bruised. Their little empire won't scare me for a while. He outlined the training ground scene. By calling Kajin our cadet, the twins had officially claimed and lost and in Mew's pawn. And since flag bearers won't personally storm the intermediate yard, they have one tool left. Gilly's eyes widened. Missions. Right. They'll game my assignments, stack solo tasks, push me toward accidents. I can speak to their nannies. You mustn't, Jean said. If they sniff it out, they'll cry abuse of power and have grounds to discipline us. And mission boards are a flag bearer's turf. Damn it, Gilly muttered, then flushed. Sorry. It's fine, Jean said, smiling as Murakin called her strawberry pie. Besides, there's a gap they don't know about. The hardest jobs are solo. If they send me alone, I don't have to keep pretending. On solo runs, there were no allies to hide from. Magic, spirit arts, forbidden forms. He could use everything or kill the witnesses. Solo missions become free gains, he said. I'm tired of playing with just a sword. Mission results were the true measure in the intermediate class. High-risk solos carried the fattest scores, and often meant assassination and espionage. Good plan, kid, Murakin said. With your full kit, Gilly added, you can match weaker advanced cadets. And if one looks too rough, I'll tag along, Murakin offered. Even a solo mission allows a pet cat. They would, Jean said. But I'll need you for something else. I'll explain later. For now, I have Luna's training. Don't cause trouble while I'm gone. Intermediate training began in earnest. Same bones as beginner class, only sharper, real blades, higher stakes. In the afternoon, Zed led Jean and the twins into a sealed court. There, only direct blood learned Runcandel sword. Our style, put simply, is overbearing, Zed said. Destructive, unyielding. Our temperament forged into steel. They knelt, all three. As Jean had predicted, the Tona's faces were purpled and swollen. Their sisters hadn't been kind. Zed didn't ask. He'd never been impressed with them, and yesterday's humiliation hadn't helped. He had pulled them aside after class with one simple warning. Do not cross the youngest until you're strong enough, if you want to live. You know this already, Zed went on, but our sword has no fixed forms. We have secrets and finishers, but those are for flag bearers. What blood learned was formless. No patterns, no steps. That set Runcandel apart. Do you know why? Because of our blood's gifts, Jean said. Body and blade, sense no normal human has. Correct. Our line is blessed. We feel ourselves and the sword in ways the common stock never will. The blessing bloomed at different times and to different degrees, but it bloomed in every Runcandel. Magic, by contrast, almost never did, Jean being the rare exception. Zed rose. What I'm about to teach is simple, even crude. Stand.
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
Zed pointed next to the 3 kids. Over there were roundish balls of metal piled up like mountains, and several tables standing next to those piles. Bring those tables and steel balls here. How many of them should we move? Zed smirked maliciously at Haytona's question. 4 tables, and as many steel balls as you can. The 3 boys began moving the tables and balls towards the center of the hidden area. The steel balls were heavier than your average person. Moreover, when they picked one up, they felt something dense moving around inside. What are these? As he moved the steel balls, Jean scanned through his memories and confirmed that he had never seen these objects in his past life. Yet, he wasn't surprised about that. From what he had deduced, these steel balls were used to teach the direct Runcandel descendants the clan's swordsmanship. However, Jean wasn't talented enough to enter the intermediate class and train with his uncle in his first life. Thud, thud. Each time they dropped a ball to the floor, it left dents on the hard ground. Zed only told them to stop after the 3 boys moved around 50 of those steel balls. Do you know what these balls are? He asked as he placed one of them on a table. The ball was now sitting slightly below the height of Zed's waist. No, sir. These steel balls are called clear stones because you can hear a clear echo resounding when you hit them. The Tana twins tilted their heads in confusion. They couldn't understand why they needed these stones in order to train their swordsmanship. Meanwhile, Jean didn't show his emotions, but he was curious to know how they'd end up using these clear stones. Zed slowly unsheathed the sword attached to his waist and placed it against the clear stone. I will swing my blade down onto this ball a total of 3 times. Try comparing the sounds that are created. The first swing, Zed didn't put much force behind his sword and simply lowered his blade onto the ball lightly. Thump! A rather thick and murky sound echoed in the room. It felt as if one would feel nauseous by listening to it for an extended period of time. Not a pleasant sound, isn't it? Soon enough, Zed struck the ball again. This time, his swing contained far more strength and speed than before. Clang! This time, a pure and elegant sound worthy of the clear stone's name resonated in the room. It felt like the sound entered their ears and soothed their entire bodies from the inside. Oh! The twins exclaimed simultaneously. Jin's eyes also widened as he stared at the clear stone. It's also quite pleasant for me to listen to. It's been a while since I last heard this sound. As you have seen, the clear stone emits a thick and murky sound when you hit it weakly, but creates a beautiful sound when hit with the perfect amount of strength. It was a simple principle, but Jin was concerned about how Zed didn't tell them what this perfect amount of strength was exactly. Thus, he soon realized the purpose behind this training method. The goal of this exercise is to create that beautiful sound every single time you strike the clear stone. Striking it with the perfect amount of force and speed once would be easy to achieve. But after observing Zed's behavior, it seemed that achieving it every single time was a much harder exercise. They would have to strike the ball countless times until they found the perfect strength. However, the boys would most likely be distracted by the unpleasant sounds created by their imperfect strikes every time. Even so, just because their concentration has been disturbed doesn't mean they could abandon this exercise. In other words, this exercise was also to train their willpower and mental strength. But why did he say he'd strike it 3 times? The first and second swings were to show the importance of fine control over one's strength. The third swing would most probably be for the same objective. Jin couldn't see another reason behind hitting the clear stone. We're doing this exercise since it fits the Runcandel's physical capabilities quite well. Uncle said that this training was simple and unsophisticated. However, there's far too few dangerous hazards in this exercise. The Runcandel-style swordsmanship was all about overpowering another and ruling by force. In other words, their techniques were powerful enough that it could potentially harm its user. Thus, there was no way the training exercise that was only accessible to pure-blooded Runcandels would be so safe and risk-free. There was definitely something shaking around inside the clear stones when I picked them up. It felt and sounded like some piece of metal. Jin found the answer to his question as Zed raised his sword one last time. He then immediately grabbed the back of the Tana twins' necks, standing on both of his sides, and pushed. And now the third strike. Get down, Jin shouted as he shoved them forward. The surprised twins fell to the ground along with their little brother due to his strength. As soon as they touched the floor, the twins were about to hurl curses at Jin, but could only blink their eyes in shock as they watched the situation unfold. Boom! With Zed's final swing, the clear stone exploded with a deafening roar, and from within it came hurling out dozens of steel marbles. They flew in all directions like arrows. An average person would have easily died from being pierced by all these powerful projectiles. Why? The astonished twins stared at their surroundings. They felt their heart drop as the marbles rolled around on the ground. The youngest has great instincts. These clear stones have been designed to explode if they sustain too great of an impact. Zed spoke with a pleased smile on his face. Jin got up and dusted himself off. It seemed that his uncle wasn't in his right mind either. He had put his nephews in life-threatening danger without a word of warning beforehand. Was anyone in this clan actually sane? In any case, Jin began to ponder. Every Runcandel has gone through this training. Since most of my siblings have been taught by Uncle Zed as well, they somehow survived this hazardous demonstration. In Jin's case, he had survived the explosion by getting on the ground in time, thanks to his instincts. The Tana twins had survived thanks to their brother. Then what about all the others? You three are the first ones not to get injured during the Clear Stones demonstration session since Luna. Other than her and you boys, all your other siblings were gravely wounded by the steel marbles. You can think of this as a rite of passage. As they watched Zed laughing out loud, the Tana twins once again realized that their upcoming adventures in the intermediate class were full of pain, agony, and struggles. Meanwhile, Jean felt proud by the fact that they were the first ones to be unscathed after Luna. Uncle, may I ask you how eldest sister Luna avoided these steel projectiles? You'll get upset if you hear about it. At least, all your other siblings got upset when they heard what she did. I do not mind. Technically speaking, Luna couldn't avoid the marbles like you. In fact, none of your siblings managed to avoid them all. She just received them head-on, but didn't get injured. She was just that robust and strong. Just as Zed had warned them, it was a somewhat disheartening story. Even so, Jean was quite satisfied. Had one of his siblings avoided all the pellets while being ignorant of the dangers of this demonstration, it would have meant that they were more gifted and talented than Jean himself. In any case, I assume that you three have understood the content of this exercise. From today onwards, you boys will spend your afternoons swinging your swords onto the steel balls every day. You'll only stop when you're able to strike the clear stones in any circumstances and successfully create a clear and beautiful sound each time. Luna's room. The woman in question was spending a peaceful and relaxing time inside, sipping on a cup of tea with her nanny. It's about time the youngest starts to show some results from our mind's eye training sessions. It'll hurt if he gets hit by the clear stone's projectiles, but I'm sure he'll manage to do something about it. It's so gratifying to watch him grow up and get stronger. Siup, Lady Luna. Yes, Nanny. I believe that Lady Anne and Mew are quite suspicious. There was the incident where they tried to keep young Master Jean in check to take into account. The two of them were conversing about the potential suspects behind the assassination attempt on Jean when he was merely a year old. There's already been an assassination attempt against me. I've never talked about it to anyone else, not even Gilly. And due to that incident, my fight has already begun. Ever since Luna first heard Jin's words when she visited him at the Storm Castle, she has been searching for the culprit to this day. She hadn't given up even after 5 whole years. It was because she greatly cared about her youngest brother, but that wasn't the only reason. It was a long-established and traditional taboo within the clan for a pure-blooded Runcandel residing in the main house to aim for the life of a family member that had yet to leave the Storm Castle. If Luna informed Siren about this incident, it would cause great chaos within the clan. However, she judged that doing so wouldn't benefit Jean, so Luna decided against reporting to her father. Moreover, they had no evidence to show Siren about this attempted assassination. It's true that those two are very domineering and tend to step over their boundaries, but I don't think so. Would they be crazy enough to attempt to assassinate someone inside the Storm Castle? Technically speaking, Jean hadn't been the target of an assassination attempt, but rather the target of the bladed illusion curse. However, Luna wasn't aware of this truth yet. To be truthful, I believe that there's the possibility of young Master Jean having lied to you. He was only 10 years old back then, so isn't it highly likely? We haven't found out anything after all these years. I don't think Jean lied to me. Back then, he was wary of me, not because he found it awkward to interact with me for the first time ever, but because he was on guard. His gaze. It was the gaze of someone whose life was being threatened. Then should we investigate Lady Mew and for the time being? Yeah, I'll leave it in your care. I'm more concerned by the fact that we haven't discovered anything so far. Something's wrong. I have an ominous presentiment. I feel the same way, but I'm more concerned for you, Lady Luna. I'm worried your siblings will break your heart again. I'm already in my 30s, Nanny. Luna hid her bitter smile with her teacup. And so, a day went by. Jean and the Tana twins had yet to create a beautiful sound by striking the clear stones. Fortunately, there were still no incidents where someone accidentally burst the steel balls. Thump! Thud! The unpleasant noises have been echoing inside the hidden training room for 4 hours straight. I can declare with certainty that amongst all the training I've done in my life, this is by far the nastiest. These abominable sounds had been disturbing his concentration. The twins had already vomited on the ground a couple of times. In the meantime, Jin was sweating buckets, but somehow managed not to let go of his sword and drop to the ground. In the morning, he had experienced the intermediate class's hellish training, and in the afternoon, he was constantly hitting the clear stones. Jin was on the verge of death. He couldn't get used to these unpleasant sounds and echoes no matter how hard he tried to. Take a 5-minute break. As soon as the words left Zed's mouth, the three boys sat cross-legged on the floor. However, the Tana twins' posture was terrible as they were exhausted both mentally and physically. In fact, the 5-minute break wasn't quite a break. According to Zed's training regime, the boys had to hold their swords straight and cover them in aura while sitting upright and maintain that position during the so-called break. So the break was, in other words, an exercise where they were training their aura. Jin's hands were trembling as they squeezed the sword's handle, whereas the Tana twins couldn't even hold onto theirs properly. While it was the nastiest training Jin had ever experienced, it wasn't the most difficult one. In his past life, Jin had trained several dozens of times more than others in order to become a 1-star knight by the age of 25. Compared to his despairing and miserable days back then, this exercise with the clear stones was somewhat bearable. The purpose of this training was to increase our aura's destructive power in the first place. Zed had destroyed the clear stone without using any aura, but that was only possible because he was an 8-star knight. The three boys first had to train and develop their auras in order to strike the clear stones with enough force to make a beautiful sound, let alone make them explode. Daytona, Haytona. Sit straight. If you can't endure this, you won't be able to survive within the clan. As Zed spoke calmly, the twins fixed their postures with tears in their eyes. It was tear-jerkingly difficult for them, but Jin knew that they would successfully become flag-bearers of the clan thanks to his past life's knowledge. Even my stupid brothers managed to become flag-bearers in the past, so there's no way I won't be able to do it. Therefore, there was no need for Jin to feel impatient. The boy closed his eyes and focused his senses on the aura covering his sword. Thump, thump. Even though he could hear the residual auditory hallucinations from the echoes earlier, Jin kept his eyes closed and concentrated. He was quite good at erasing all distracting thoughts and keeping his eyes closed. I noticed it the first day as well, but that kid, he's quite something. The Tana twins aren't doing so badly either, but this one, he might even break Luna's record. Zed praised Jin in his mind, but didn't express it out loud. He could always praise the boy when he broke Luna's record. The Clearstone training session only ended at 9 p.m. after the Tana twins collapsed side by side. They had completely exhausted their physical and mental strength that they ended up falling unconscious. Pathetic. Zed clicked his tongue and called the medical team. Meanwhile, Jin didn't fully agree with his uncle's statement. It's quite impressive they've lasted this long in the first place. Jin was still standing on both feet. His legs were trembling like crazy, and the unpleasant ringing was still echoing in his mind, but he was standing. The attitude and dedication the twins had shown today were praiseworthy. In all honesty, even Jin was on the verge of collapsing. If the training had continued for another 30 minutes, he would have surely flopped onto the ground. The medical team placed the twins on stretchers and took them out. Make sure you tell your brothers that if they plan on fainting during tomorrow's training as well, they shouldn't come to class in the first place. I understand. Jin exited the hidden training room and pondered to himself as he walked back to his dorm. Seeing Uncle's reaction, I was close to disappointing him as well. Had the training been slightly longer, I would have fainted, and Uncle would have considered me a failure as well. I should be more careful tomorrow. However, Zed was having different thoughts than what Jin was predicting. He stayed behind in the hidden room, staring at the spots where his 3 nephews had been standing until moments ago. The Tana twins ended up collapsing far later than what I was initially expecting. Kikek, their Runcandil's all right. But the youngest, despite being 2 years younger than the twins, he had managed to endure the training today without falling unconscious. It was an incredible feat, considering his body hadn't developed as much as theirs. A shame. Such a shame. Why did he have to be born as the youngest? According to what Zed had witnessed today, Jin was the most talented child among Siren's 13 children. While it was debatable whether or not he was better than Luna, he was far more gifted than Joshua, the soon-to-be patriarch. However, he was too young. Jin was only 15 years old. Even if he trained seriously and became a 9-star knight by the age of 30, Joshua would already be leading the clan by then. These days, the patriarch's authority and power were slowly beginning to be transferred over to Joshua already. Very slowly but steadily. If only he were born 10 years earlier, he would have had the Runcandel clan in his grasp. Currently, Jin's talents and growth speed were seeds that would sow chaos and havoc in the clan. If Jin were to become the strongest person in the clan in 10 or 15 years and aim for the throne, how much damage would he cause to Joshua's rule? To the Runcandel clan? And what if the clan's enemies, such as the Zipfuls, took advantage of the inner conflict to attack the clan? As his thoughts reached that conclusion, Zed let out a deep sigh. Let's keep watch for now. Seeing how Luna cares for him, Jin might grow up to resemble her. He might become a shadow that protects the clan, just like that child. Countless variables that could affect Jin's future and growth existed. The boy could die during a mission or could suddenly decide to leave the clan one day and become a wanderer. Children go through many different experiences and incidents as they grow up, so Zed couldn't predict Jin and the clan's future as of yet. March 1795. A month had gone by. Jin and the Tana twins were in open warfare for hegemony from day one. But since they were stuck in a clear stone training room the entire afternoon, there were no real fights between them. Ever since Kajin Ramello was cut down by Jin, the other cadets didn't dare lay a finger on the youngest division, even when the young master was away. They had also been ordered by Mute and not to do so. Jin's two older sisters had decided not to interfere with the happenings within the intermediate training class, just as he had predicted. They had no more expectations for the Tana twins. The idiots had borrowed their best intermediate class cadet and had returned him defective, so they had no reason to support the twins anymore. It's so peaceful that it's concerning. Mesa spoke as she dusted the dirt off her clothes, which were in terrible condition as they had just finished their morning training session. The cadets around her were in the same condition as her. Do you think the young master is doing okay in the afternoons? We don't even know what they're being taught. Velop asked with a worried tone, but Mesa snorted. We aren't at the level where we can worry about the young master. But from time to time, I hear explosions inside the hidden training room along with people screaming. The medical team always seems to be in a hurry to head inside when that happens. The Tana young masters were even brought out on stretchers before the training session had ended 2 days ago. Stop worrying and focus on your own training. Don't you remember what the young master told us? We'll be assigned missions soon enough. Disgustingly difficult missions, according to the young master. Except for Mesa, Scott, Jushin, Taimont, and Kiko, the other members of the youngest division didn't reach the average level of intermediate class cadets. In other words, Eddington, Sierra, Phils, and Bellop weren't supposed to be sent out on missions yet. Well, technically speaking, Bellop was skilled enough. He just hadn't recovered a good enough mental strength yet in order to utilize his abilities to the maximum. I do not wish to be a hindrance to the young master from now on, so we should focus on our own problems right now. We all need to reach 3-star at the very least before we're given our first missions. She's right, and it's thanks to young Master Jin that we're not being harassed or persecuted during this faction war. The cadets nodded with resolute expressions. Attention! The intermediate training class's assistant instructor, Male Trazel, yelled out loud. There were a total of 3 assistant instructors in the intermediate class, and they were all guardian knights of the Runcandel clan. Male was the main assistant instructor. The first missions of this year's intermediate class have been issued. There are a total of 5 missions. I will now call out names. The cadets who have their names called must step forward. There are a total of 60 cadets who will be dispatched this time. The cadets who had spent several years in the intermediate class didn't show any particular reactions. However, those who were in their 3rd year or less were showing tense expressions. The first is a monster subjugation mission. The subjugation targets are goblins. You shall hear the details of the mission from Petro, the 2nd butler. The cadets involved are Dankello, Atten, John. The second is a bodyguard mission. The commissioners that need protection are the rookies within the Minche Smithy Association. It will be beneficial to some of you if you get friendly with them. Those involved are Houston, Baiting. The third mission is another monster subjugation. The targets are orcs this time. The area of operations is an unprotected zone as well. The cadets involved are, Male's hands stopped once he flipped the page. He frowned before making sure he had read the names right on the document. The area of operations is an unprotected area, but all the cadets are newcomers. Young Master Jin will be displeased by this. It'll be difficult for everyone to return alive, but it's not like we can complain to the flag bearers. Male coughed awkwardly before finishing his sentence. Mesa, Scott, Taimont, Kiko, Zhushun, Eddington, Sierra, Phils, and David. Petro will inform you about the details as well. I bid you all Godspeed. A ruckus began amongst the intermediate cadets. Not only were the targets orcs, but they were to enter an unprotected zone. Half or more of the youngest division would certainly die during this mission. However, there wasn't a single word of protest addressed to the assistant instructors. Since the flag bearers had chosen this lineup, they had no say in this. If someone were to object to this, it had to be the faction's leader, Jin himself. If Jin were to go find the flag bearers personally in order to complain, he could easily change the members of the third mission. He could either make a deal or make use of Luna's authority and influence. However, that would end up biting him back later on. He would be publicly admitting that his faction's members weren't skilled enough to be sent on official missions. And if he made use of Luna's authority, Jin would be proving that he himself had no power or qualifications. In this case, Jin would checkmate himself. Thus, the youngest division had no choice but to go along with it and carry out the mission. Instructor, what are the fourth and fifth missions? Those were assigned to the young masters. You need not concern yourselves. Dismissed. Once you've had lunch, the cadets who were assigned missions may take a break from class until they depart. You will be dispatched in 2 days. Once the assistant instructors made their leave, a commotion began within the cadets. Damn, good luck to those kids. There's going to be at least 4 or 5 deaths. It would have been better for them to not be a part of any faction. Didn't I say so? If you join the wrong faction, you'll only see a sea of blood. The poor kids. The cadets who were part of Mu Annan's faction, like Kajin, all wore suspicious grins as they nodded between themselves. We'll have to prepare some coffins. Kikek, we should have a proper funeral for them. Since they have 2 days left, let's have someone paint their portraits in advance. Oh, and they shouldn't forget to write a will. Wahaha, have a good trip, you cutie pies. Otherwise, you could ask young Master Jin for some help. Please save us. Please save us. Kekekek. The cadets in Mu and Anne's faction giggled between themselves as they stared at the youngest division. Tama was about to stand up and face them, but Mesa grabbed him by the shoulder and held him back. Endure it. We still can't win against them, and starting a fight right before we leave on a mission will do us no good. But those bastards were... Shut up and sit down, Taimont. You don't want to cause problems for the young master, do you? Do I really have to spell out to you? A fuming Taimont sat back down. What do we do? Sierra sighed deeply. The other members of the youngest division were also wearing distressed expressions. Is that a question? This is the Runcandel clan. If they want us to go out and fight, we go and fight. We'll do whatever we can to accomplish the mission successfully and return alive. That's the one and only way we can trample on those bastards' pride and humiliate them. Mesa spoke as she ground her teeth. Despite her confident front, her hands were trembling lightly. No, she wasn't afraid of death. She was simply disappointed in herself that she could only be a hindrance to young Master Jin and cause him problems. Boom. Ark. Hey, Tona. Hey, Tona's clear stone had exploded. This was already his third stone today. The steel marbles grazed Tona and headed towards Jin, who was concentrating on his own sword and steel ball. Haytona was hit in the chest and Jin in the flank. Had it been his own steel ball exploding, Jin would have avoided the projectiles. But someone else's ball exploding and marbles flying at him from the side? Even that was unavoidable for him. Zed was sitting in the corner, calmly reading the mission documents as if he didn't care what was happening to them. Ugh, fuck. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, Daytona. Sorry, Gene. I didn't do that on purpose. Daytona fearfully approached Gene. Daytona followed suit as he scratched the back of his head. As he watched their actions, Gene began to wonder if they were truly the same nefarious homicidal maniacs from his first life. I'm fine, but from now on, I want you two to practice in that corner over there. Sure. The Tana twins grunted as they pushed their tables towards the corner. There was a reason why the twins were so obedient to their little brother. After having spent time training together for an entire month, they soon realized that their uncle's words were correct. Do not confront the youngest until you two are strong enough. That is, if you wish to live long. The Gene they had witnessed so far was a beast. Today, the Tana twins had finally gained enough strength to make the clear stones blow up 3 to 4 times per session. However, Gene had already been blowing the stones up since a couple of days ago, creating 5 to 6 explosions every session. Today, I will definitely create a clear sound. Definitely. His flank was throbbing from the pain. He didn't feel his ribs cracking, so he was physically fine. However, his breath was completely erratic now. Phew! Phew! Gene closed his eyes and regulated his breathing. He could subconsciously see the clear stone's surface, its rigidity, and its weight in his mind, despite the darkness. As the pain in his flank kept disturbing his focus, Gene felt a sudden change. A strange sensation overtook his senses. For some reason, he could precisely see the direction the steel marble had flown to hit him despite his closed eyes. It was being drawn in his mind. What is this? Why do I suddenly feel like? As he was about to open his eyes and verify the marble's actual trajectory, Zed suddenly stood up. Gene and the Tana twins immediately ran before him and corrected their stances. The details of your missions have been delivered. The Tana twins' mission was to attend a ceremony. They were being ordered to attend several events and parties organized by the Vermont Emperor and the Empire's dukes to curry favors with them. In truth, calling this invitation to parties a mission was an embarrassment. There is absolutely no risk of them seeing any blood or conflict during this mission. All they had to do was eat the excellent dishes prepared at the parties and have fun in the Empire. Ugh, a ceremony? In the Vermont Empire at that. However, the Tana twins' faces crumpled once they heard the details of their mission. Attending ceremonies was a type of mission that was only assigned to direct members of the Runcandel lineage. The clan could ignore invitations and the like from your average nation, but the Empire's invitation was a different story. The Runcandels couldn't refuse them so easily. Thus, one of the Runcandel children had to accept the invitation and attend the events. So, whenever an invitation arrived from the Vermont Empire, the Runcandel children prayed to avoid being chosen. None of them wanted to attend those sickening and boring parties. My condolences, boys. Thanks to your sacrifices, your siblings won't have to go to the Empire and dance around aimlessly. Is that a sigh I hear? Although it's an invitation to parties, this is a bona fide mission. If you show this sort of attitude again, I'll beat you two up so badly you'll beg me to kill you. The Tana twins nodded as they hid away their disgusted expressions. This mission was more or less a punishment for them. Their elder sisters were punishing them, as they had failed to trample on their youngest sibling even after borrowing a 5-star cadet from their faction. Attending parties was a drudgery for the twins, as they didn't have an ounce of oratory skills and hadn't learnt the subtle art of surviving in social situations. Geez, elder sister Mew and are so ill-natured. Gene laughed to himself. It's a mission someone has to accomplish, and when you arrive on site, you will see dozens of powerful people, whether it be in their combat prowess or their authority and influence. Make sure you observe them carefully. Understood, Uncle. And you, Gene? Yes, Uncle. The mission you've been assigned is... Zed stopped halfway through the sentence. The Tana twins paid close attention to his next words. They were curious to know how crazy of a mission their sisters had assigned to their youngest sibling. Hopefully, it was something that would break Gene physically and mentally. In fact, the best-case scenario would be that Gene wouldn't return at all from a mission. An assassination task. Your target is the master of the hidden palace Talaris's plaything. You basically need to kill a loafer. The master of the hidden palace. That is the title given to the owner of the hidden palace, an enormous tower standing in the middle of the West Sea. The 51st master is Talaris, nicknamed the Abyssal Spider. The hidden palace is an independent force that is influenced by neither the Runcandels nor the Zipfels. Uncle, by plaything, you mean the Abyssal Spider's plaything? It's that woman's lover. Jin's assassination target was the master's plaything. In other words, her paramour. Jin had to kill one of the countless young men Talaris was playing around with. Oh snap. The Tana twins unintentionally let out words of shock. They didn't believe that Jin would be able to kill the master of the hidden palace's lover and return alive. Talaris's notoriety was known around the world, even to the country bumpkins living in some corner of the Mytel kingdom. She was especially known for being merciless to the people who laid a finger on her lovers. Your target is currently residing in the lawless zone of Mummet under the protection of members of the Hidden Palace. Mummet! Holy smokes! The twins exclaimed out loud once again. Missions in the Mummet lawless zone were generally assigned to Guardian Knights. It wasn't a mission that a mere intermediate class cadet like Jin was supposed to undertake. Killing the master of the Hidden Palace's lover in Mummet. You could easily summarize the mission with that sentence. The Tana twins already believed that Jin would never return alive from this mission. There is one question I like to ask, Uncle. What is it? Was our client? As Jin asked in a confident tone, Zed's lips rose into a soft smirk. This kid, he should know who the master of the Hidden Palace and where Mummet is, but he's going to accept the mission immediately? If he claimed the mission was irrational, I would have been willing to go say a word to the flag bearers myself. Zed was somewhat hoping Jin would be shocked and vexed. Recently, the elder's greatest enjoyment was watching his youngest nephew grow. Even the unsympathetic Zed didn't appreciate sending a yet-to-be fully forged sword on a dangerous mission like this, where it would most certainly break. However, Jin didn't show an ounce of shock or vexation. Since the cadet in question was planning on accepting the mission, Zed had no reason to intervene. The Tsendler clan, your target, the loafer, is called Alcaro Tsendler, the disgrace of the clan. I see now. They're worried that the child who left the clan will spill the clan's secrets to the master of the Hidden Palace. Exactly. It seems that Tsendler clan tried to solve this issue on their own, but gave up and came to us instead. Looks like the child in question doesn't have a good reputation in the first place. Can you do it? Zed asked with great anticipation. He was deeply hoping the words, "This mission should be assigned to Guardian Knights instead," would leave Jin's mouth. I will do it. Why are you so? No, never mind. It's good to be decisive. Zed coughed awkwardly before handing over the documents to his nephews. You will all depart in 2 days. You are excused from the afternoon training sessions until then. In the meantime, make sure to train on your own, but only to the extent that it doesn't hinder your mission. Yes, Uncle. Zed exited the hidden training room first. The Tana twins stood around Jin awkwardly for a while. While they felt ecstatic by the fact that their brother was about to die, they were also disgruntled by it, as if there was a bitter taste in their mouths. The twins didn't know that they had a strong bond of love and hatred with their little brother. What? No, good luck. Come back safely. Yeah, it's not like you're gonna die, right? If something goes wrong, just reveal that you're a Runcandel. Then no one will be able to lay a finger on you. Haha, geez. Are you worried about me? I didn't know you two had such adorable sides to you. We're not worried. Before I return. Jin interrupted Daytona and unsheathed Bradamanti, covering it in aura. The twins froze as their brother had suddenly pulled out his weapon. Swoosh! Before they could even ask what he was doing, Jin swung his sword, aiming it at the clear stone sitting behind them. Clong! A beautiful metallic sound resonated, bouncing off the arched ceiling and echoing in the room. Jin smiled in satisfaction. He had suddenly felt like he would definitely succeed if he struck the clear stone right now, and that feeling turned into reality within a few instants. 1 month had passed since they began training with the clear stones. Jin had no idea how inconceivable this record was. You two should make a choice, elder brothers. Whether you prefer our elder sisters or me. The Tana twins gulped audibly before clumsily nodding. Jin then exited the room, leaving the two of them behind in silence. What do we do? I don't know. Elder sisters are out of their minds, while our younger brother is not in his right mind. Seriously, but I think that the youngest is scarier than elder sisters. I agree. The twins sighed in dejection. Having made his way outside, Jin wasn't concerned about his mission. Rather than the dangerous task, his mind was far more interested in another topic. What was that sensation earlier? The steel marble that had come flying out of the clear stone Haytona had blown up. After getting hit by it, Jin suddenly pictured the marble's detailed trajectory in his mind for no reason. It also felt like if another marble came hurling at him from the same direction, he would be able to avoid it. I should ask Elder Sister Luna about this once I return from my mission. This sensation might be related to the training I had been doing with her. 2 days went by in a flash. Those who had been assigned a mission had finished their preparations yesterday. All that was left to do was to go to the Huphester transfer gate and teleport to their respective destinations. Phew! Young Master. Before he got on the steel carriage, the members of the youngest division called out to him. They were all wearing somber expressions, as if they were a herd of cows being led to a slaughterhouse. No one could guess how many of them would die in their upcoming mission. However, that wasn't the only reason they were dejected. We heard you're going to the Mummet Lawless Zone. Indeed. I need to go to the transfer gate separately since I was tasked with an assassination mission. I also need to go through all the administrative procedures properly. How annoying. We've come to bid you farewell before departing. The reason why the youngest division had come to salute him was quite obvious. This could be the final time they would see the young master. Not only was it likely that some of them would die during their mission in the unprotected area, young Master Jin himself was tasked with a mission in which he had an 80% chance of dying. Other than Jin, everyone else in the intermediate class thought he was headed to his death. No need to. Why? Do you think we'll never see each other again? Jin said in a playful tone, to which Masus sighed deeply. The other cadets couldn't even lift their heads up properly to face the young master. Well, it's true that life doesn't always go the way one expects it to. Some of us may die on our mission if we're ill-fortuned. We'll be okay, but the mission you were assigned is... Geez, no need to worry about me, you brats. Focus on your own mission only, all right? Yes. Get going then. We'll see each other when we're back. The youngest division hesitantly stood around before going down the corridor. Such endearing kids. Keep them safe, Murakin. Meow. I've said this already, but make sure you don't get seen, all right? Mo. The black cat raised its front paw and waved it, as if he were saying, worry more about yourself, kid. I'll be lonely for a while since both of you are leaving. Young Master, Lord Murakin. Think of it as a break, Gilly. Do you want some souvenirs from Mummet? I know that you're stronger than intermediate class cadets, young Master, but please be careful. Mummet is a dangerous place. To think that you have to assassinate the master of the Hidden Palace's paramour. Please take good care of yourself. Yes, I'll see you soon. Jin didn't get on the steel carriage, but rather on horseback. He had already dyed his hair brown yesterday and was currently dressed like an ordinary traveler. The boy had Bradamani with him, but he had covered the blade in a layer of metallic coating to conceal its normal color. With such a disguise, no one would ever think of him as a Runcandel. This was his second mission, but his first solo mission. As Gilly had stated, the current Jin was quite a force to be reckoned with if you took all his abilities into account. Even so, the mission was a dangerous one where he could lose his life. Nevertheless, Jin was fearless. In fact, he was excited about how he'd be able to use spiritual power and magic as much as possible. I've always wanted to visit Mummet since my past life. Before his regression, Jin's magic teacher had mentioned that Mummet was more of a romantic city than he had expected. Having spent 2 years in Mummet, his master would tell fond stories about the city. Within those stories were countless details about the city and its populace. I remember Master saying that the pubs in the center of the city are locations where informers and spies often go. And if I want to buy high-class information, I need to head to the underground black market. To think that his master's boring stories would come in handy like this. Of course, there was a difference in time period, so some of the information may be inaccurate for now. But the system and order within the city was unlikely to have changed. With a feeling of gratitude towards his master in his heart, Jin pulled on the horse's reins and began his journey. A refreshing sense of liberty rushed through him as he departed the Garden of Swords on his own. Translator's section. Jin's off on his first solo journey. Can't wait to see what happens. Also, the moron twins are starting to grow on me. They're like cute little idiots, ha ha ha. I hope they get redeemed and become allies Jin can trust. The Mummet Lawless Zone was a region where all kinds of criminals and offenders gathered. There were even rumors around the world that due to the evil energy these lawbreakers emitted, this criminal-infested land was so desolate that no plants could grow on it. But it was no rumor. Mummet was, in actual fact, a barren wasteland where not a single strand of grass grew. The scorching sun that glared down on the area. The criminals that crawled around in the small city like disgusting insects. There was no gateway to enter the city. There was only a broken signpost surrounded by rubbish. And once you walked past that signpost, you were inside Mummet. Here comes a newcomer, you sons of bitches. A hulking man shouted as he barged inside one of the pubs in the center of the city. He was carrying an equally large and terrifying iron mace on his back. Wahaha, newcomer my ass. I bet you're back because you were put on the wanted list again. Freaking hell, are you a salmon or something? Stop coming back all the time. The people inside the pub cheered joyfully as they all recognized the hulking man. Mocking someone until one loses their voice, pointing fingers, and throwing entire mugs of beer are Mummet's traditional yet peculiar ways of greeting others. Crash, smash, clang. The thick mugs smashed into the newcomer's head and chest. The glass fragments covered the floor along with a sea of beer. Nevertheless, the barman didn't even bother glancing at the mess, let alone clean it up. The hulking man that was hit by countless cups smiled delightfully and grabbed one of the glass shards on the floor. Crunch. Soon enough, a sight that one could normally only see in a circus occurred. The man chewed on the piece of glass and swallowed it. That's right, I'm a salmon. The Great Thonk's true birthplace is right here in Mummet. Drink up, everyone. The drinks are on me today. Geez, Thonk, what did you do this time that you had to run away and come back here? Come on, speak up. Let's hear the story. Kohaha. The Great Thonk had some fun with a high-class bitch in the Ekin Kingdom. Oh, who was it? No idea, just some girl from a noble family. And I killed the 5 guards who came to arrest me. Geez, do they seriously think they can capture me with ordinary guards? They kept sending them as well. Kohaha. Those fucking morons. Yep. That's why I smashed them up like mashed potatoes. About 50 of them? While I was destroying them, I subconsciously headed towards Mummet and found myself here before I realized it. To Thonk's massacre. Cheers. Cheers. Welcome back home. It's good to see you again. Gulp, gulp, gulp. The men were emptying their glasses. The rowdy craze calmed down as everyone was busy finishing their beers. But in the meantime, creak. One boy entered the bar, covered up in a tattered robe. It was Jin. Looks like there's a real newcomer this time. Thonk and the other men exchanged glances, asking each other if anyone knew who this was. But everyone shook their heads. Thud, thud. A thick noise echoed every time Jin took a step with his old, ragged boots. He silently crossed the room and sat down next to Thonk. 1 glass of cold water and some simple snacks. Jin took out 1 silver coin from his chest pocket and flicked it to the barman. Huh. The barman caught the coin and snorted as if he couldn't believe what was happening. Soon enough, the entire pub roared in laughter. Kia, wow, I thought I was watching the protagonist of an action novel or something. Look at him. He's a natural at acting cool. So, who are you, HM? Some 9-star knight. Can't you see? He's got to be a legendary swordsman. The men spouting sarcastic comments all simultaneously changed their expressions. They swiftly stood up and surrounded Jin with menacing grins and chuckles. Hey, Mr. Newcomer, the Great Thonk am in a good mood today, so let's not get on each other's nerves, all right? If you get on your knees and suck on everyone's toes right now, I will forgive why, Kurg. Thonk was interrupted before he could even finish his sentence. In fact, he would never be able to finish his sentence ever again because the tip of the dagger Jin had taken out was lodged in Thonk's neck. The hulking man was standing too close to Jin without keeping his guard up, so he didn't even have the time to react to the boy's attack. No one had expected this young brat to stab a giant like Thonk in the neck without a speck of hesitation. Cooker. Once Jin retracted his dagger, blood gushed out of Thonk's wound as he fell to the floor. A long moment of silence followed. No one uttered a single sound. Jin silently waved his finger at the barman, urging him to bring his cold water and snacks. He's gone. Thonk's gone. I knew this would happen one day. Soon enough, the men surrounding Jin scattered around. They behaved as if the friendly exchanges they had with Thonk until not long ago were a sham and returned to their respective tables, downing beer in their original groups. This was a common occurrence. No matter how friendly they acted with Thonk, there was no true friendship between them. Just as Master used to say, this place is filled with lunatics. The reason they had shown interest in Jin was because he appeared weak. They were curious to know why a boy, who seemed to have yet to grow any hair down there, had entered a den of criminals like it was nothing. However, their questions had found an answer. Jin killed Thonk with a dagger, and by doing so, gained the approval of the criminals inside the pub. This was how the residents of Mummet truly welcomed a newcomer. I always seem to be in your debt. You've been a great help to me, both in my past and present life. I hope the day comes when I get an opportunity to repay you, Master. Clack. The barman placed a glass cup on Jin's table. A cup of cold water. I didn't put in any poison. Even I know that killing people with poison is a taboo here. You seem to know a great deal about Mummet despite your youth. Are your parents or siblings familiar with this place? None of your business. Cling. This time, Jin flicked a gold coin to the barman, who just shrugged in response. What do you want? Drugs? There's one product that's been the craze in Mummet recently. Or are you looking for someone? The latter. Is that enough to cover the fee? The barman rubbed the coin with a handkerchief and calmly weighed it with his hand. The substantial weight proved that it was a genuine gold coin. Depends on who you're looking for. Is there someone who goes by Hister in this area? No. That I'm certain of. Jin clicked his tongue as if he were disappointed. I see. Then just bring over my snacks. And if you could, recommend some inn to stay at tonight. Preferably a place without any bugs. A place without any bugs signified the safest inn in Mummet. Then I know just the place. There's an inn called the Moonlit Well west of the city. The kings of Mummet reside there, so no need to cause a fuss when you enter. Thanks. Jin emptied his plate of rough bread and dry bacon before leaving the pub. The atmosphere inside the Moonlit Well was vastly different from the pub, since the most influential people of Mummet resided in it. It was surprisingly clean and orderly, just like an ordinary inn outside of Mummet. It wasn't comparable to a high-class inn in a big city, but at the very least, the clients wouldn't come across lowly criminals who behaved like wild dogs. Even if he's the master of the Hidden Palace's lover, he's just the disgrace of the Tsemler clan. This is the only place where Alcaro Tsemler could stay in the city. There was no real need to go down to the underground black market to buy more information on Alcaro. According to the documents and information sent by the Tsemler clan to the Runcandels, Alcaro wasn't someone who would be willing to spend the night in a dirty and damp inn. He was a conceited, rich brat who hadn't experienced any hardships in life. Alcaro Tsemler acts obedient to powerful people and overbearing to the weak. He only wants premium goods and services and is obsessed with hedonistic pleasures. The only qualities he has are his good looks and his lineage. There is only one reason why this fancy pants was residing in this dangerous city. It was a superficial scheme trying to regain the master of the Hidden Palace's attention, as she was recently engrossed in another paramour. A childish tantrum along the lines of, will you really not show any attention to me when I'm in such a dangerous place? But if the master of the Hidden Palace genuinely paid attention to him and came to Mummet to check on Alcaro now, Jin wouldn't have another opportunity to kill him for a long time. If the master herself protected Alcaro personally, even Luna wouldn't be able to assassinate him. That was why the Sindler clan had urgently commissioned the Runcandels using this opportunity. For now, rumors about me will spread around Mummet. Things like some kid killed Thonk as soon as he arrived, and he's looking for someone called Hister should spread to everyone. Jin had wreaked havoc in the pub for a reason. After causing a ruckus in a location where low-ranking informants gathered, he had spread false information, saying that he was looking for Hister, that he had come this far in search of this specific person. And this rumor would reach the hidden palace bodyguards protecting Alcaro within the day. Jin had done this because the bodyguards were most likely checking every customer's identity. In consequence, Jin would naturally be excluded from their prioritized surveillance target. If someone were to come with the goal of assassinating Alcaro, they wouldn't suspect a boy like Jin who wasn't hiding his presence and clumsily trudging along in the city. The people who had come to assassinate Alcaro so far were all skilled, hired mercenaries. But since I look a lot sloppier, it's unlikely they'll suspect me much. Alcaro's bodyguards wouldn't focus on people like Jin who had a clear objective. In fact, they would be more wary of someone like Thonk, a criminal who was familiar with the city, who recently returned to Mummet for no apparent reason. An assassin wants to blend in with the residents and mingle with them, trying not to attract attention. But with how Jin was doing it, he was standing out to be forgotten. As they say, it is darkest under the lamp. In fact, his strategy worked like magic. The men who were observing Jin inside the moonlit well during the day visibly let down their guards once night fell. It seems that those three are the hidden palace guards protecting Alcaro. They appear to be 6-star or stronger. If I face them head-on, I have a very low chance of winning. If he fully utilized both magic and spiritual power, Jin could somehow deal with one of them. But 2 or more were impossible. An entire day went by, but Alcaro was nowhere to be seen. Jin came to the conclusion that Alcaro was constantly staying inside his room, eating the food that his bodyguards were bringing him. It's impossible to assassinate him by entering his room. There are probably more men standing guard inside at all times. In that case, I need to wait for him to come out. Jin recalled Alcaro's personality as it was written in the documents sent by the Sindler clan. Alcaro Sindler is obsessed with hedonistic pleasures. Suddenly, Jin remembered something the barman had told him the day before at the pub. What do you want? Drugs? There's one product that's been the craze in Mummet recently. It was very likely that Alcaro was stuck in his room doing drugs. Once his thoughts reached that conclusion, Jin wiped his forehead and headed downstairs to the lobby. He was planning on cracking open a cold one and getting to know the others in the lobby. But once he arrived, he had to prevent his shock and surprise from appearing on his face. Just why? Why can't you do it? You were getting it fine until yesterday. I cannot do it anymore. God damn it. Go get some more. I'm telling you. The young man having a temper tantrum at the center of the lobby was Alcaro Sindler himself. Jin had memorized his target's face in advance, so he recognized him immediately. It appeared that he was enraged, as one of his bodyguards wouldn't get him more of the drugs. Your typical lowlife douchebag. Jin smiled maliciously in his mind. Before Jin's regression, back when he had just been banished from the Garden of Swords, there was a period when he roamed from country to country, sleeping out in the open. He had lost his lifelong goal after being banished from his clan and was surviving like a cripple on the streets. But everything changed when he met his magic teacher. Nevertheless, until the day he met his master, Jin had seen and experienced countless types of criminals and scoundrels in the dark alleyways where no one entered. Petty thieves, robbers, beggars, alcoholics, etc. Those people lived like no tomorrow and were only loyal to their desires. The most notable scumbags amongst them were druggies. Drug addicts. Those people couldn't survive for another day without their drugs. Without their medicine, they would sit lifelessly with hollow eyes and foam in their mouths. But if someone were to offer them the drugs, it was second nature for them to be willing to carve out their hearts to pay. 10 times out of 10, 100 out of 100, 1,000 out of 1,000. Every single drug addict Jin had seen was the same, without a single exception. There were some rare people who had managed to stop their addiction with their superhuman willpower and return to an ordinary lifestyle, but obviously enough, they were one in a million. In any case, according to Jin's observations in the documents he had read, Alcaro Tsindler wasn't someone with such strong willpower. Fuck. Please, do me a favor, all right? I don't think I can survive for another hour without it. Please, I'm begging you. Alcaro flopped onto the floor and put his hands together, begging his bodyguards. The hidden palace guards were all wearing composed looks, but Jin noticed the slight disgust in their gazes that appeared momentarily. As I've said before, it cannot be done. Our task is to prioritize your safety, young master. Please keep in mind that we're not here to babysit you. If you continue to have a temper tantrum, we will have to. Aorg, I don't care. Shut up. If you won't get me the drugs, then I'll do something myself. Fucking hell, just you wait. Once my sweetheart returns, you're all losing your heads. Your heads, do you hear that? I'll make sure you're all executed. HAA. Huh? Did you just sigh? Am I a joke to you? You lowly guards. You insignificant pleb bastards. I'm finna send. Thwack. One guard suddenly punched Alcaro in the abdomen. The arrogant druggie trembled on the spot for a few seconds before fainting. God damn it. How much longer do we have to protect this piece of crap? I wish he'd just die from an overdose or something. Just why is the master keeping this piece of shit alive? Silence. We just need to fulfill the mission we've been assigned. You mustn't get your personal feelings involved. The guards carried the unconscious Alcaro back to the room. Having witnessed the entire scene, Jin felt like he had discovered a treasure chest full of gold. Alcaro's relationship with his bodyguards is the worst, and it seems like he'd be willing to do anything to get drugs once he wakes up. As he drank the beer the inn's employee brought him, Jin pondered to himself. Assassinating Alcaro would not be such a difficult task in the end. The druggy young master's tantrums would get worse and worse as the days went by. And if his outbursts repeated enough times, Jin would have more opportunities to assassinate him throughout the next few days. Whether he used magic, spiritual power, or a plain old dagger, killing Alcaro was going to be a piece of cake. But the problem is the aftermath. I need to find a way to avoid the guards and return home safely after I've killed him. That was the most difficult aspect of this mission. It was impossible to kill him in broad daylight inside the inn and escape alive. The 6-star or higher bodyguards were far more physically capable than Jin and could catch up to him in no time. Poison wouldn't work either. If Jin baited Alcaro with drugs and killed him using poison, the entirety of Mummet would be in an uproar. The greatest unwritten taboo in the lawless city is the usage of poison. Jin's head began aching as he tried to come up with a plan. Assassinating Alcaro inside the moonlit while using traditional methods was impossible. Bang! Having chugged down his beer, Jin placed the mug back on the table with vigor. I made up my mind. Jin had come up with a strategy. He would do a terror attack on the moonlit well using magic from inside his room. The moonlit well was the inn where the kings of Mummet resided, a building where the most notorious and prominent figures amongst the worst criminals of Mummet were gathered. As soon as the terror attack begins, these kings of Mummet would counterattack and track down the culprit. Moreover, their main suspect would be a 6-star or higher magician. If I cast a 4-star spell and enhance its effects with spiritual energy, it should be as powerful as a 6-star spell. The most effective way would be to use the lightning spell, Summon Lightning, and amplify its firepower. Who in the world would ever believe that a 15-year-old kid was a 6-star magician? No one. Not a single soul. Even Baradin Zipful, a candidate to become the next Zipful patriarch, had just become a 6-star magician at the age of 18, shaking the entire world with his genius. Blindly casting 6-star spells at the age of 15 was impossible to do, even for geniuses for the Zipful clan. No need to overthink this. I'll fill my room with spiritual energy to cover up the traces of magic being cast. When something gets covered in spiritual energy, its existence and presence becomes faint, no matter what it is. Jin had once thrown a dagger covered in spiritual energy and easily managed to kill a 4-star warrior. Mana and aura weren't an exception to this rule either. Jin was confident that he could effortlessly conceal 4-star spells with his spiritual energy. Thus, the guests residing in the moonlit well would believe that the terror attack had originated from outside. There was no way the powerful kings of Mummet wouldn't notice mana suddenly being generated inside the inn. Therefore, they'd trust their senses and believe that the culprit was outside. I'll amplify the summon lightning spell and drop it on the moonlit well. I'll probably be injured as well, but I should be fine since I have Orgul's pendant with me. Orgul's pendant could nullify most of the effects of 5-star or lower magic spells. 6-star and onwards were a bit more dangerous, but the pendant's nullifying powers weren't completely useless. With my current mana and spiritual energy, I think I can use the amplified summon lightning spell a total of 4 times. If I cast the spell 4 times on different areas of the inn, it should start an uproar amongst the guests. In the meantime, Jin would pretend to be injured and walk around the inn. And once he found Alcaro, he'd kill him and complete his task. It would be even better if Alcaro unluckily got hit directly by one of the lightning spells and died immediately. I've always felt annoyed by how young I am, but it's pretty helpful at times. Just as its name implies, Summon Lightning is a spell that attacks someone with a sudden streak of lightning falling from the sky. It only lasts for an instant. Thus, it would be hard for people to notice that there was spiritual energy mixed in with the spell. And even if someone did discern some dark energy within the streak of lightning, it was likely that they just think of it as some unknown variant of the normal spell. Spiritual power wasn't very well known around the world, whereas all kinds of magic variants existed throughout the continent. Jin's regression, his spiritual power, along with his innate talent with magic. Had he been missing one of these, he wouldn't have even thought of attempting a terror attack on the moonlit well. There's no need to wait a few more days. We never know what that drug addict might attempt to do if I wait for too long. I'll initiate the plan at noon tomorrow. Instead of attacking during the evening or the middle of the night when most people were asleep, it would be far more efficient to attack in broad daylight. The more people witness the 6-star summon lightning spell with their own eyes, the more beneficial it was for Jin. Translator: Coco's muscles are sore from bouldering. Proofreader: Yuki's brain is sore from thinking. https://discord.gg/maregmfhrb. 10:30 a.m. Jin descended to the lobby and ordered a late breakfast. He was served freshly baked bread, boiled eggs, and soup. This was all part of his plan. He had to behave like every other guest staying at the moonlit well and start his morning as a normal human being. 5 of Mummet's kings were at the lobby eating breakfast as well. They smirked as they sensed the weak aura exuding from Jin. Kid, you seem to be quite talented for your age, but you shouldn't stay for too long in this city with that level of skills. You'll just be at a disadvantage if you stir up trouble. One of the 5 spoke to the boy. Thank you for the advice, but there is someone I must find. I will make sure I don't cause any trouble for the people residing here. Ah, what a docile lamb. Even though you were a ferocious wolf who killed someone with a dagger in mere instants not long ago, you are on a completely different level compared to those drunkards. I know my place and know when not to cross the line. Your manners are adequate. Good. I shall allow you to stay here for a few more days. Thank you very much. I shall never forget how the kings of Mummet took care of me, even after I leave the city. Jin slightly lowered his head and left his seat, returning to his room. The kings of Mummet found his attitude endearing and began chatting amongst each other. Mummet is done for. Look, even brats like him are coming and going as they please now. Well, I'm sure he'll leave after a few days. If not, he'll probably get killed by some random lowlifes in the area. Still, he seemed like quite the decent kid. Maybe I should recruit him into our organization as a rookie. Don't. He'll probably end up a cripple if you let your men loose around him due to his good looks. Wahahaha. The kings of Mummet all burst out in laughter. My manners are adequate? What laughable pieces of trash. Having returned to his room, Jin also exploded in laughter. He found it hilarious that the scoundrels who had committed some of the worst crimes in the city were being advocates of manners and courtesy. He couldn't wait to drop some thunderbolts on their heads. Jin sat down cross-legged in the middle of the room. He closed his eyes and released spiritual energy. Soon enough, dark smoky energy began seeping out of his entire body. In order to start the attack at noon, he had to diligently prepare the smaller details early on. I'll fill up the entire room with spiritual energy so that no one can sense anything from outside. As his room was tiny, he could cover up and fill in every little crack within an hour. This single hour was the most important step of the plan. If someone came to his room during this time, his plan would be in shambles. He could constantly hear footsteps outside his room in the corridor. It was the sound of the employees cleaning the place and guests leaving and entering their rooms. Well, I have to take a risk. Otherwise, I won't be able to accomplish anything. Jin properly began the spiritual release. As the room filled up with more and more dark energy, the sounds from beyond his door got fainter and fainter. This gave Jin a sense of security and calm. The hour went by. The room was filled with spiritual energy, as if ink had permeated into every surface and into the air. One couldn't discern the outline of the furniture. It was basically synonymous to total darkness. The only entity that had retained color inside the room was Jin. I gotta say, quite the perfect work, Jin. Phew. Jin regained control over his breathing and wiped off the sweat on his forehead. All that was left to do was generating mana and preparing to cast summon lightning. I'll make the spiritual energy inside the room disappear by infusing it inside the final summon lightning spell. Afterwards, all that's left to do is scream and run out of the room, pretending to be injured and to check whether Alcaro's alive or not. A simple, yet effective strategy. As Jin praised himself and his plan, he began gathering mana in both his hands. Crackle, crack. Blue electricity ran down his arms to his hands as they generated a lot of noise. However, not a single soul could hear sounds outside the room, just as Jin had planned. Next, string-like strands of spiritual energy were mixed into the electricity. Summon lightning. Boom! The first bolt of lightning fell onto the moonlit well, destroying half the building's roof. Arc! Before the casualties could cry out in pain, before the uninjured could raise their heads to look at the sky, a second streak of dark blue lightning struck down on the moonlit well. It was the second attack. People began running out of the ashen and destroyed guest rooms, screaming for their lives. What the? Looks like I chose the wrong day to come here. And a certain girl, who was about to set foot inside the moonlit well, tilted her head in confusion as she watched the spectacle. It seems that a high-ranking magician bears a grudge against one of the guests residing in the moonlit well, Milady. I shall go locate the magician. You stay here and protect Milady. The two men standing beside the girl spoke in turn. However, she just snorted and spoke in a mocking tone. Do you think I'm some powerless idiot who can't even protect herself? There are 6 of her guards inside the inn already. In other words, this may be a terror attack against the Hidden Palace. Ryu, go search for the magician. He-Ten, come check on the guards inside with me. Ryu and He-Ten lowered their heads in respect to the lady. The girl who had commanded them was Cirrus Indorma. She was the master of the Hidden Palace Talaris Indorma's daughter. We can kill someone like Alcaro whenever we want. So instead of him, make it your top priority to check on our guard's safety and well-being. Understood, milady. Ryu leaped in the air to track down the magician. Meanwhile, Cirrus and He-Ten entered the inn. Boom! The third bolt of lightning fell onto the moonlit well. This time, an entire floor was destroyed, and the kings of Mummet shouted their frustrations at the top of their lungs. Even Cirrus and He-Ten stopped in their tracks. Now that they were seeing it from up close, the lightning bolt's power was far greater than they had expected. Fucking hell. Just which son of a bitch is it? Minka, you bastard. Didn't you say you killed a few magicians from the Zipfel clan not long ago? Aren't they back to get revenge on you? I was bluffing. It never happened. The customers ran out of the inn and bickered amongst each other. But not all of them were doing so. As they were called the Kings of Mummet, some of them were getting ready for battle, while the others were trying to find the source of the magic spells. Immediately, the final lightning bolt struck the inn. The fourth bolt was far stronger than the initial 3, as Jin had amplified the spell using all the spiritual energy in his room. This, in turn, erased all traces of dark energy in it. Boom! Crash! The streak of electricity struck the inn in the center, and the building was split in half. The divided inn was on the verge of collapsing on either side. Cook. More guests covered in soot and ashes escaped from the dust and joined the lobby. Barely 30 seconds had passed since the beginning of this pandemonium. The people had no idea who had attacked the moonlit well. Looks like the attacks have ceased. Yes, milady. As Cirrus and He-Tin entered the remains of the building, Jin came falling down from the second floor. Thud! Ugh! Falling from the second floor wasn't that painful, but Jin had dropped the final bolt near his guest room. TL/N. In Korea, you start counting floors from first, second. So there's no ground floor/floor 0. So he didn't fall from that high up. That last one was closer to the level of a 7-star spell. Maybe because I infused all the spiritual energy in the room with the spell. Had it not been for Orgel's pendant around his neck, Jin would have received a fatal injury. But as of right now, he had gotten away with a burnt robe and some veins popping here and there in his body. The boy looked at his surroundings, acting as naturally as possible. He had to check whether Alcaro was still alive or not. While he didn't see his assassination target, Jin did catch the bodyguards running around in a rush. There was still smoke filling up the air in the lobby. If Alcaro had survived the extremely powerful lightning spells, Jin had to find him now and kill him. This was his only chance. Jin was about to take out his dagger, but froze. He looked up and saw an unknown girl looking down at him. Oh, I never thought I'd find a boy around my age here in Mummet. Hey, are you all right? You should head outside to safety for now. Milady, our men seem to be gathered over there. All 6 of them are safe and sound. That's a relief. For now, tell them to assemble. And if they're still protecting Alcaro, just order them to kill him. Understood. And once Ryu finds a magician, go capture him with our men. Since the spells all looked similar, it must be a single magician behind this attack. Yes. The boy on the floor immediately came to a realization as he listened to their exchange. She's the master of the Hidden Palace's daughter. From her attitude, she came all this way to deal with Alcaro. An unexpected encounter. But Jin thought of this meeting as a blessing rather than misfortune. According to what she said, even if Alcaro survived the spells, they'll kill him anyway. So there's no need for me to check on him and kill him myself. Moreover, the master of the Hidden Palace's daughter thinks this attack was caused by a magician and doesn't suspect me. From now on, the person holding the highest authority here in the inn would be the master of the Hidden Palace's daughter. Even if the kings of Mummet were revered by the city and treated as royals here, they didn't stand a chance against her. It's highly likely that she'll suspect this was a terror attack against the Hidden Palace. Then all I need to do is pretend to be terrified and escape from this place. It wasn't just the girl. The rest of the customers residing in the moonlit well were thinking a magician had attacked them. Thus, the chances of Jin being accused as the culprit were extremely low. However, there was one problem. If the master of the Hidden Palace's daughter sees my face, things can get complicated later on in life. It didn't matter much if the leaders of Mummet or the small fry of the city saw his face. They would never meet again in Jin's life, and even if it ended up becoming problematic, he could just silence them in the future. But the master of the Hidden Palace's daughter was a completely different story. She was someone Jin inevitably had to meet if he stayed at the Garden of Swords. Milady, is everyone all right? Where's Alcaro? We have no excuses. Alcaro has perished from the attacks, just now. We have failed to protect him. Is that so? That's perfect. No need to be ashamed. Good work enduring that moron's irritating behavior so far. I came all this way to deal with him in the first place. While the girl conversed with her men, Jin grabbed a handful of soot and rubbed it all over his face. This was better than nothing to hide his face. Schling! Cirrus unsheathed a pure white sword and raised it in the air. The Hidden Palace shall now take control over this inn. I am Cirrus Endorma, daughter of the master of the Hidden Palace, Teleris Endorma, captain of the Hidden Palace's 7 swords. All those who oppose will be considered enemies of the Hidden Palace from now on. He-Tin, order our men to block and regulate all movement and activity in a radius of 500 meters. Make sure nobody can move until Ryu has found the magician. Understood. Yes, milady. Did you say you're the master of the Hidden Palace's daughter? Still, this place is Mummet. So as the kings of Mummet, it's a bit irritating if you try to take control of the situation despite our very obvious presence. Also, isn't it highly possible that we were attacked because of the Hidden Palace in the first place? The one who spoke up was the king of Mummet who had mentioned about manners this morning to Jin. Once he finished stating his point, the other kings around him nodded in agreement. He-10. Yes. Bring me his head. As those terrifying words echoed, He-10 vanished from his spot without a trace. SCRRT. The guard appeared behind the opposer out of nowhere, and a metallic linear flash was reflected in everyone's eyes. He-10 brought the head of the dead man, who still had his eyes open, and politely laid it at Sirius's feet. I mentioned that all those who oppose would be considered enemies, didn't I? And kings of Mummet, have you been playing royals in this rubbish heap of a city for so long that you've forgotten your places? Is the Hidden Palace a joke to you, kings? The kings of Mummet all averted their gazes, some coughing awkwardly. They weren't weak in any way. If the kings of Mummet all united their forces, they could even stand a chance against Sirius's subordinates. However, none of them wanted to have the Hidden Palace as their enemy. Ahem. We don't want to have you people as our enemies either. But at the very least, do respect us and be mindful of our positions. The one who just died wasn't completely wrong either, was he? If it's revealed that the attack was aimed at the guards of the Hidden Palace, we will compensate you for the damages. But what if it's the other way around? What if our men were innocent bystanders of an attack that was aimed at one of you people? Sirius sharply retorted, to which the kings of Mummet couldn't refute. Sigh, all right, do as you wish. We didn't know that the guards who were protecting that druggie were part of the Hidden Palace. We shall leave you in charge. We also wish to find the magician and kill him, so our goals are aligned. Good. For now, have all the survivors gather here. Currently, one of the Hidden Palace's 7 swords is searching for the magician out there, but it's still possible that the culprit is someone amongst you. That's unlikely. None of us are magicians. I don't doubt that, but it's possible that one of you recently got on the bad side of this magician in question. Pieces of trash like you cause all kinds of trouble wherever you go, am I right? In any case, have everyone gather here. The kings of Mummet all sighed as they descended the stairs along with the other survivors. Meanwhile, Sirius lowered her gaze. Why are you still dilly-dallying here? Didn't I tell you to head outside to safety about 3 minutes ago? Unlike her conversation with the kings of Mummet, Sirius was using a much softer and tender tone when addressing Jin. The boy curled up in order to hide his face as much as possible. That's because it's terrifying, and I hurt my leg earlier. I'm sorry. Ahaha. You're quite fearful for a young man, even though you've got a sword at your belt. How cute. Now get moving, and forget everything you saw today. Oh, and put this on your leg before leaving. Thank you very much. Sirius took out an ointment that was brewed using healing mana. Jin was about to receive it with his sooty hands, but Sirius smiled and shook her head. Look at your dirty hands. Just let me put it on you. Pull back your pant leg. Still, aren't you quite the lucky one? Not only did you survive a terror attack, I, Sirius and Dorma, am personally putting ointment on your leg. You should feel honored. Jin clumsily pulled back his pant leg. Sirius crouched down and rubbed some ointment on the boy's shin. In the middle of his shin was a deep and long gash. Why is she so kind? The master of the Hidden Palace's daughter was infamous in my first life for being crazed and out of her mind. Were the rumors completely unfounded? Once she finished putting on the ointment, Sirius and Jin's gazes met each other. The girl had not a single ounce of suspicion towards the boy. Furthermore, she was happy to finally meet someone of her age group in this desolate city and felt like helping him out. They are all done. He-10, why is Ryu taking so long? Don't tell me he can't find the magician? That Ryu, he is somewhat late indeed. Should I head out there and search for the culprit as well? Forget it. The magician seems to be skilled at concealing themselves. Even so, they must be inside the city, so it's only a question of time. I doubt Ryu won't be able to find his target. It's just a measly magician after all. I concur. After straightening his pant leg, Jin stood up and bowed deeply. How can I return this favor? As he asked her, Jin had to hold back the smile that was about to creep up on his face. After completing the terror attack, if the kings of Mummet held him back for some reason, things could have gotten complicated for him. However, the situation had unfolded so easily. Moreover, Sears wasn't trying to check Jin's face properly either. She was simply showing him kindness and sending him on his way. How could you ever repay a debt to someone like me? Just think of this as a nice memory. And if you remember me from time to time, just bow in the direction of the hidden palace whenever you can. Well then, bye. Having left the moonlit well inn, Jin followed the streets and left Mummet. While he had gotten some help from Cirrus, Alcaro had still died from Jin's own magic, so he had no reason to feel guilty or ashamed about the completion of his mission. In the meantime, the youngest division was on their own mission. And contrary to the expectations of all members of the intermediate class, the members of Jin's faction were faring quite well against the orcs. They had already subjugated 17 of the 25 orcs they were assigned to defeat. This makes 18. At this rate, we might all actually return alive with no casualties. Scott and Timon extracted their swords from the orc's corpse. Let's return safely and destroy all of those bastards' pride and ego. I was worried we'd ruin the young master's reputation, but if this goes on, it might be the opposite instead. There's still 7 orcs left. We mustn't let down our guards until we subjugate them all. While Mesa burst their little bubble of excitement, she was actually smiling deep inside. It's almost as if we were blessed by the gods. No, it might be young Master Jin who was blessed by the gods, and his good fortune rubbed off on us as well. All the members of Jin's division were of the same opinion. Normally, orcs moved in groups. However, for some reason, these orcs were appearing one at a time, as if they were asking to be killed. Moreover, they were never in a hurry and attacked the cadets sluggishly. No wonder they thought they were extremely lucky. Resume, scouting the area. Make sure you stay vigilant, everyone. The Jin division cut and stored the dead orc's ear in a bag and returned to their respective positions in the formation. As they moved through the forest, one man observed the cadets from behind, hidden in the dense, tall grass. Once they defeat the remaining 7 orcs, I can finally go back home as well. The man wearing a bored and dull face was Murakin. Mesa thought that the god's blessing was protecting them, but it was in fact the black dragon Murakin who was acting as their guardian angel. Murakin had arrived here in the unprotected zone of the Kirano dukedom before the Jin division and had assembled the orcs. Afterwards, he told them as such, "Listen carefully, you stinking pigs. I won't say this twice. From today onwards, you all need to move around alone. If I see a single one of you trying to build a group and gather other orcs, I will personally annihilate you all. Do you understand?" Lowly orcs couldn't go against the orders of the great black dragon. Moreover, he had spoken to them in dragon tongue, the language that represented the authority of the dragons. Dominating the minds of low-class monsters with dragon tongue was as easy as breathing to Murakin. He was the only reason the Jin division could safely defeat the orcs 1-by-1 so far. Needless to say, the cadets had no idea about this truth. Still, it seems like Jin, that kid, he's planning on continuously sending me on these trivial missions. Geez, do you think being the promised contractor of 1,000 years makes you the boss of me? Fuck, it does. Damn it, that son of a... The members of the Jin division managed to subjugate the remaining 7 orcs the next day in the middle of the night. We did it. We really made it alive. This time around, even Mesa couldn't hide her joy and glee and cheered along with her teammates. They had completed the mission one day earlier than what they had expected. We'll take turns resting and keeping watch until the afternoon. Once everyone has gotten some sleep, we're returning to the Garden of Swords. We switch the members on night watch duty every 45 minutes. The one on food duty will prepare breakfast. And so began their late night/early morning camp. Murakin also lied down amongst the tall grass near the campsite. He was planning on spending time until afternoon came by reading the erotic magazines he had brought with him. As he read the magazines, his annoyance and irritation slowly disappeared. He hadn't been able to spend time reading them until now, as he had to keep an eye on the human brats, kids who weren't even involved in his destiny. Once we're back, I'm definitely telling the kid to get me several limited edition magazines in return for this favor. Hee, thinking of it like that, helping these brats on their mission is quite profitable for me as well. Flip. Murakin suddenly closed the magazine he was reading and sighed. He could sense a dangerous presence in the distance, slowly approaching the campsite where the Jin division was staying. He didn't know who this presence belonged to or what their objective was, but Murakin was certain about two things. One, the individual was slowly approaching the cadets' campsite, and two, the individual had considerable power. Seems like fate isn't on our side. At this rate, the effort I put in this mission won't match the profit I'll make. What did this bastard suddenly pop out of? TSK. Murakin clicked his tongue bitterly and stood up. Fortunately, the cadets of the Jin division were only at the 3-star level. Thus, Murakin could erect a large barrier around the campsite, and the kids wouldn't be able to differentiate the darkness of the night from the shadowy hemisphere protecting them. SSSSSSSSSSSSSD. A handful of shadows gathered in both of his palms. This was on a completely different scale compared to the demonstration he had done in the underground chamber of the Storm Castle. As Murakin lived alongside Jin on the surface of the continent, he was slowly breathing in some of the abundant shadows around him on a daily basis. Therefore, he had regained some of his strength from the era when he was known as the Black Dragon that shook the world. As Murakin covered the campsite in a barrier of spiritual energy, Bellup, who was on night watch duty, tilted his head in confusion. He felt like his surroundings had suddenly gotten darker than before. However, he didn't think much of it. The boy merely believed they were deeper into the night and didn't notice the barrier. As a gust of heavy wind shook the trees, Murakin covered his entire body in spiritual energy as well. Soon, what emerged from his original position was an enormous black dragon. It was Murakin's original form. Swoosh! His gigantic pair of wings covered the moon. All the monsters, alongside the animals and other living creatures in the area, began to tremble in instinctive fear and subconscious terror. Unsurprisingly, the powerful entity that was approaching the campsite also stopped in its tracks. It had detected Murakin. Who dares to leak their energy in my presence without my permission? Murakin flew into the sky and covered the moon and stars. The black dragon blocking the moonlight exuded a dangerous air that no one would doubt it of being an agent of the gods. However, there was no answer. Unfortunately, Murakin wasn't as merciful as usual when in his original form. Swoosh! Swoosh! With each flap of a wing, a dark storm swept through the area. A storm of shadows. As the tempest raged in the forest, it snapped large trees like twigs and swirled around the source of this spiritual energy. Only then did the individual lying down in the distance finally stand up to reveal themselves. Having verified the response from this entity, Murakin stopped flapping his wings. Its gigantic body that could be compared to a fortress was covered in rocks. Beneath the large helmet molded with ancient magic were two bright red eyes, glaring at the dragon. Finally, there was an immense spear and shield in both of its hands. It was a being called a cemetery giant. Oh, I see. It wasn't a living being, but rather an outdated relic from the old ages. Murakin was surprised by the appearance of this cemetery giant. The cemetery giants had already disappeared without a trace around 2,000 years ago. They were tasked with protecting the graves of the deceased gods, but the dragon race had exterminated them. In other words, this giant wasn't supposed to exist in modern times anymore, let alone appear before Murakin. As the dragon calmly landed on the ground, the cemetery giant raised its shield. For a short while, Murakin looked down at his enemy and felt something was wrong with this situation. But I'm not pleased to see you. KRRR. The cemetery giant let out a disgusting groan and lowered its stance. Murakin tightened his scales as he recalled the ancient war between both races. He was preparing to release his breath. While would leave behind traces, he had to finish this fight as quickly as possible. Murakin opened his jaw and darkness gathered in a dangerous sphere. After a few seconds, he had amassed enough spiritual energy to completely raze an entire mountain range to the ground. Sighing, as he fired his breath, the surrounding area was suddenly submerged in total darkness. The cemetery giant lowered one leg and hid its body behind its shield, but it couldn't withstand Muraken's strength. Go! All it could do was yell one last groan upon death's door, just as the rest of the cemetery giants had done 2,000 years ago when facing the dragons. Crumble. As it breathed its last, the cemetery giant fell apart into small pieces, and a rain of rubble came down where it was previously standing. Huff, huff. After the end of the battle, Muraken returned to his human form and panted intensely. His entire body felt like it was breaking apart as he had used too much power for the first time in a long period. There's no way one cemetery giant just randomly survived the war until today and stayed undetected. Fuck, I'm sure that the Zipfels are somehow related to this incident. What on earth is happening around the world right now? After pondering for a short moment, Muraken shook his head. For now, I shouldn't tell Jin about this. No matter what happens, I just need to protect him. As long as the kid grows steadily for another 10 years, he'll be strong enough to face the Zipfels. The next day, in Bouvard Gaston's fragmented workshop's underground room, Bouvard was walking in circles and dragging his fat body around. He was anxious enough that he couldn't stop biting on his thumbnail. Creak. One man entered the room. With a slick coat and a fierce gaze, this stern individual was Vishical of Liano. He was the vice leader of the revolutionary group Kinzalo. Lord Vishical, a problem has occurred. My work of art, my masterful work of art was... I've already been told about it. The cemetery giant was destroyed last night, wasn't it? Indeed. Ugh, just who would do such an atrocious act? How dare they treat my artwork in such a way? Are they looking down on the soul of an artisan? Vishical sighed deeply. In order to achieve Kinzalo's grand objective, this moron who preached about the soul of an artisan was indispensable, and Vishical found that truth to be unfortunate. Bouvard, your artisan's soul isn't what's important right now. The cemetery giant was destroyed by a dragon last night. A dragon? That's right. In fact, it was a dragon that controls shadows. I confirmed it with my own eyes before coming here. Vishical was extremely anxious and on edge that he was about to go crazy. Kinzalo had prepared their grand master plan since 500 years ago. They were finally putting their plan in action, but this incident had suddenly hindered them. Moreover, most active dragons these days were working for the Zipfels. Bouvard stopped making a fuss and stared at Vishical silently. That can't be. Are you saying the dragons have already noticed our movements and plans? Not only that, it was a shadow dragon. Nothing's certain for now, but that was definitely a warning from them. I'll try to have a meeting with the Zipfel sometime soon. In the meantime, make sure you keep an eye on everything that happens in this area. I'll lend you some useful men to work with. Understood. Ugh, I can't believe this. Ah, speaking of which, Lord Vishical, have you had breakfast yet? I'd like to have a sweet potato croquette. Vishical endured the boiling rage inside him and barely answered back. Sure, I'll go buy some, so let's eat together. That sounds good. I like some fresh milk as well. He also vowed to himself that he'd murder this sickening fat ass with his own hands one day. Jin and the youngest division's successful return from their respective missions were the hottest topics within the intermediate class. Nobody had predicted this outcome. Most people believed that while some members of the youngest division would return alive, many of them would perish during the mission. However, Jin was the biggest surprise. He had to assassinate the master of the Hidden Palace's lover in Mummet, and no one thought it was achievable. They all thought that Jin would return without completing the mission. No one in the world wants to die at the tender age of 15. Kuaha, the flag bearers who assigned you this mission must be taken aback. I bet they're fuming right now. Even Zed was surprised by the success of the mission. He praised Jin in front of the other cadets several times and showed his satisfaction and delight. Every time it happened, the Tana twins shrank back in fear, and the other cadets accepted that Jin had become the new trend of the intermediate class. Yes, the new trend. The members of the youngest division were the target of envy from the others. More and more cadets were hoping to join the youngest division instead of Mew or the Tana twins factions. But there was one group of cadets who were grinding their teeth in irritation as they watched this new trend. For what I've heard, some random magician happened to attack the inn where the assassination target was residing on the same day. The damned young Master Jin has such good luck. What an unfair world. Not only was he born a Runcandel, he's also blessed with good fortune. Some of us are only intermediate class cadets, even though we used up all the luck in our lives. TCH. They were the cadets from Mew and Anne's faction, including Kajin Ramello, sitting on the ground and complaining together. Previously, they were at the top of the food chain in this jungle-like intermediate class, but recently, their authority and power had taken a nosedive. The lowly cadets who once used to be wary of them were now sucking up to the youngest division, and that annoyed them to death. If young Master Jin or the other brats were exceptionally strong, I'd accept this outcome. But young Master Jin is only a 4-star knight, and the others are 3 stars. Kajin, are we seriously letting them do as they please? Kajin smiled bitterly and shook his head. What would happen to us if we attempted something? He may be irritating, but young Master Jin is still a pure-blooded Runcandel. There's nothing we can do until ladies Mew and give us sword. Kajin suddenly stopped talking. He noticed that Jin, who was sitting on the other side of the training ground, was suddenly approaching them. Why is he? Did he hear us? He didn't. It's impossible with this distance. Unfortunately, I heard everything, my friends. Jin shrugged and spoke as he joined the group. Kajin and the others' expressions visibly darkened. Despite his shock and surprise, Kajin changed his attitude and let out a soft chuckle. My apologies, young Master Jin. Lowly weaklings like us are only able to rival your mighty strength by talking behind your back like this. Please forgive us for this blunder. Kajin's sarcastic and arrogant tone surprised his own associates. Even the other cadets in the area who were having their own conversations stopped talking and turned to them, eyes wide open. But the boy in question didn't think much of Kajin's words. I mean, there's nothing to forgive. I'm not a flag bearer yet, so strictly speaking, it's not up to me. You may say that, but can't you use your authority as a Runcandel to have a lowly cadet like me be whipped as punishment? I shall humbly accept any punishment you are to give me. The situation had turned sour, but Kajin hadn't forgotten that Mew and who were backing him, had far more authority than Jin. Why do you believe that I'd do such a thing? Because of my insolent and disrespectful attitude. The other cadets began to gather around them, whispering to each other. Class had ended for the day already, so Zed and the assistant instructors had already left. Hey, Kajin, watch your tongue when talking to the young master. Are you crazy? He's already overlooked your offense. Don't push your luck. You guys are the ones who shouldn't push their luck. I'm the one who'll get punished, not you bastards. Jeez, all of you have grown so much in such a short while. You couldn't even look me in the eyes until not long ago. Should I consider you guys as part of young Master Jin's faction now? Kajin glared at the spectators, and they avoided his gaze. He was the apex predator of the intermediate class until Jin arrived. He was one of the most skilled 5-star knights in the class, and had the support of Mew and Runcandel. Even the Tana twins couldn't carelessly talk to Kajin. What a distasteful sight, Kajin. Yes, I bet it must be distasteful to you, young master. But I find it equally unpleasant to watch others respect you for a mission you didn't accomplish with your own strength. It's only because you're a pure-blooded Runcandel that they're wagging their tails at you. This crazy bastard. Who do you think you're talking to? Schling. The on-looking Mesa stepped forward and unsheathed her sword. She was about to leap at Kajin to murder him, but Jin raised his hand and stopped her. Young master, I must kill that insolent bastard today. Even if I die trying, I will definitely cut off an arm at the very least. Enough. Mesa hesitated for a moment before putting away her blade. It seems you've misunderstood me, Kajin. When I said it was a distasteful sight, I wasn't talking about your sarcastic comments to the others or your insolent attitude towards me. Huh. Then what is it that you found so distasteful, young master? As a 5-star knight, you are one of, if not the most skilled cadet in the intermediate class. You may even be stronger than me. So why do you resort to simple bad-mouthing behind my back? Schling. This time, Jin unsheathed his sword and aimed it at Kajin. You could just slander me right in my face. Was it because you weren't courageous enough to face me in a fight? I'm pretty certain I said anyone could attack me if they wanted on my first day here. Kajin raised his head and silently stared at Jin's eyes. Are you certain about this? Indeed. Stand up and ready your sword. Jin took a few steps back and prepared his stance. Kajin only stared dumbfounded, and the other cadets couldn't hide their shock and tension. Just why was young Master Jin doing this? Everyone was asking the same question. While Jin was strong, they all believed that he was still lacking compared to Kajin and that he could never win against the 5-star knight. No need to go easy on me. Let's take this seriously. That sounds like you want me to go all out and even use aura. Kajin stood up and unsheathed his own sword. Correct. You will regret this, young master. Don't think that you'll be able to take me by surprise and cut my arm off so easily like last time. You will need to go all out in order to even dream of facing me. If I were to go all out, you would never be able to win against me, even in 1,000 years. What an empty bluff. Clang. Kajin was the one to make the first move. He shortened the distance between them in an instant and made use of his superior build to overpower his opponent in a frontal attack. Each sharp swing created deep reverberations which made Jin stagger. His attacks are all so heavy. Kajin Ramello, 24 years old, 5-star knight. He was only an intermediate cadet in the Runcandel clan, but in the outside world, he was strong enough that every group and organization around the world would try to recruit him. Even if he left the clan right now, he could easily find a job as a knight and be revered by the public as a respected warrior. Amongst all the people Jin had faced in a duel of swordsmanship, Kajin was the strongest opponent so far, even if you included Jin's adversaries from his past life. But compared to the people I'll be fighting from here on out, this is nothing. Clang, clang. As the battle continued, Jin kept retreating as Kajin chased him like a predator. One could easily notice the overflowing malice in Kajin's eyes as he swung his sword. Cook, are you giving up already? Do you finally have a grasp of reality now? You aren't skilled enough to pick a fight with me, young master. Kajin instantly changed his stance and grabbed his sword with both hands. He then enveloped it with aura and swung it with all his might. It was as if he were wielding a war hammer instead of sword. He had even tilted his sword to strike with the flat of his blade. He was trying to destroy Jin's guard. Boom! Even though Jin parried the blow, an explosion resonated in the area, and Jin barely managed to hold onto his sword. However, his posture was disrupted. It was the same for Kajin, but that was his intention from the start. Kajin had swung with all his might expecting to ruin his stance. Making use of the recoil from his extreme swing, Kajin roundhouse kicked his opponent in the thigh. The shin guards he was wearing amplified the total force and damage. Jin ground his teeth as his thigh throbbed in agony. He didn't have the time to groan out loud. Kajin had already regained his balance and was making a flurry of attacks. Slit. Kajin's blade grazed Jin's forehead, cutting off some of his front hair. Had Jin not leaned his head backwards, his brain would be visible to everyone by now. At that moment, Taimon stood up in a hurry. He was planning on stopping the fight, as he feared for the young master's life. However, Mesa stopped him. Do you think the young master will lose? The convinced Taimon scratched the back of his head awkwardly and sat back down. By now, all the spectating cadets believed the battle was completely one-sided. Compared to the breathless Jin, Kajin was still swiftly swinging his sword covered in powerful and glaring aura. However, Jin wasn't retreating out of fear. He was trying to concentrate his mind on a certain sensation. Just like when I got hit by Haytona's steel marble, I can slowly start seeing the trajectories of Kajin's attacks. The strange sensation he had felt when he trained with the clear stones with his brothers. There are an infinite number of paths a single blade can take when gliding through the air. But for a 5-star knight, there are only so many trajectories they can take with their level of skill. That was especially the case for opponents like Kajin, who was letting rage control his mind and body. Thus, Jin decided to end the fight with the next 3 moves. He had to provoke Kajin even more to make him use his hidden skills and techniques in case there were any. I've got a good grasp of your attacks now. You won't be able to win against me. I see that you'll continue bluffing to the end, young master. Jin only had to dodge the attacks 2 more times. He believed that Kajin was going to adhere to the attack patterns he had used so far. There was no need to change plans or tactics when it had been useful so far. In fact, now that Jin had provoked him by saying he could read Kajin's moves, the 5-star knight was never going to change his approach due to his fury and arrogance. But if Jin avoided Kajin's attacks perfectly 2 more times, Kajin would have to make a choice. Either he changed tactics with a calm mind, or he used his most powerful attack that Jin wouldn't be able to evade or block even if he saw it coming. And needless to say, the fight progressed just as Jin had predicted. One left swing followed by an irregular upward slash. Jin didn't parry those attacks and dodged them perfectly. He spread his feet apart and crouched to avoid the first move, and sidestepped in advance to dodge the second one. During this short exchange, Kajin's mind was in turmoil. He admitted that Jin could have evaded the first left swing, but the boy had dodged the unpredictable upward swing even before Kajin had begun to raise his sword. TCH. Thus, Kajin released all the aura he had to power up his third attack. Whether Jin had evaded his attacks by reading his moves or through pure coincidence, the boy wouldn't be able to dodge this one. The human body wasn't as free and flexible as water, and in the slight chance that Jin did manage to avoid it, his stance would be completely ruined, creating a great opening for Kajin to take advantage of. Therefore, Kajin decided to release a large amount of aura so powerful that number 4-star knight could ever defend from. This is the end. But Kajin couldn't finish his sentence. Something unexpected had occurred. Jin didn't try to evade the powerful attack. Instead, he covered his own sword with aura as well and swung it with all his might, receiving the attack head-on. Boom! When the 2 blades met each other, the one who was pushed back was, surprisingly, Kajin. The 5-star knight had lost to the 4-star. He had been pushed back in a battle of strength. Until seconds ago, he had been overpowering Jin with his bigger build, but Kajin had been overwhelmed this time around. His eyes trembled as he couldn't hide his shock. The aura covering Bradamani had a color and glint that was far deeper than that of a 4-star knight. I also thought it would take me a few more years to reach 5-star. Swoosh! Jin made use of Kajin's disarray and bolted before him. Anyone would be in a predicament when facing an opponent who was far stronger than what they had initially expected. Kajin finally realized he had let his guard down when Bradamani's blade reached his neck. And so, the victor was decided. Did you trick me? To think you were 5-star already, haha. Kajin spoke in a disheartened voice as his sword fell to the ground. No, you just don't know me well enough. I never fight a battle where I'm not confident of winning. What's going on here? 2 individuals came running belatedly to the training grounds. They were the Tana twins, who had heard the news of this fight moments ago. The twins couldn't hide their astonishment as they saw the 2 figures standing at the center of the crowd. He defeated Kajin. The youngest actually beat him. Jin turned around and sheathed his sword. As he passed by his older brothers with a slow pace, he calmly said, "Nothing important." The twins felt chills run down their spines and got goosebumps from their little brother's words. Translators section. So, nice fight, right? Also, anyone else confused on how Kajin got his arm back? XD. The author didn't give any details, but he did somehow get it back. But after the PR and I checked back on the older chapters, in Chapter 20 they say, as long as the injuries aren't fatal, such as amputated limbs or damaged vital organs, the medical team can fully heal the victim in an instant. So, we assume that the medical team just can't heal amputations in an instant. In other words, it's possible that they reattached it properly, but it just took longer than an instant. Author, please be more clear with things like this XDDD. Anyways, I'll see you all on Wednesday. A 5-star knight. Jin had predicted that he would take at least 3 years and 5 at most in order to reach that stage. In fact, the average Runcandel reached the 5-star stage by the age of 20. However, Jin had defeated the 5-star knight Kajin at the age of 15. While it was true that Kajin had underestimated Jin and had let down his guard, the boy would still win even if they had another duel. You lost against the youngest? Huh. Are you seriously going to lie to us? Does that even make sense? The youngest was only a 3-star knight until not long ago. No matter how much of a moron you are, this is just impossible. Mew and Anon couldn't believe what they heard from Jin's report. This wasn't a surprising reaction. Jin hadn't done a surprise attack, and Jin hadn't given himself a handicap. The 5-star knight had far more experience and physical strength than the Runcandel boy. I have no excuses. Or did you go easy on him since he's a pure-blooded Runcandel? Or did you get bribed by him? That is definitely not the case, miladies. Then what is it? Are you seriously telling me the youngest reached the 5-star stage in such a short amount of time? Do you seriously want us to believe that? Everyone else at the training ground can testify for me. His aura was that of a 5-star knight at least. Huh. Mew frowned deeply and sneered. Forget it. It's my fault for having high expectations for someone like you. Get out of my sight. As soon as Jin left the room, the two women stared at each other. The youngest is officially baring his fangs against us, isn't he? And asked her sister. No, it's not just to us. He's baring his fangs against everyone in the clan. We'll have to assign him a mission that's certain to kill him next time by sending some of our men as well. The Garden of Swords was suddenly in an uproar. The rumor that Jin had defeated Jin and had officially become the strongest cadet in the intermediate class had spread amongst the servants. However, many amongst them couldn't believe this story, just like Mew and Anon. That was how unbelievably fast Jin had grown. If you counted all the Runcandels who had become 5-star knights before the age of 16 in the clan's 1,000-year history, there were only 3. The first patriarch Timar, Siren, and Luna. However, the clansmen only knew of his growth in swordsmanship. 5-star in swordsmanship, 4-star in magic, and 4-star in spiritual power. The person in question hadn't expected to reach the 5-star stage so quickly either. He was simply training with the clear stones ever since returning from Mummet, but his aura reached 5-star in no time. During the breaks from the clear stone training sessions, he would cover his sword with aura and maintain it as such. And every time, he could sense aura amassing inside his body at an incredible speed. This phenomenon wasn't happening solely because of Jin's natural talent for swordsmanship. It was due to the synergy. The synergy between the 3 powers flowing in his body: spiritual energy, mana, and aura. Ordinary people have never had the chance of using all 3 types of energies, so they're unaware of this fact, but Jin noticed that the energies interacted with each other. If one of the powers gets stronger, it influences and strengthens the other 2 as well. Moreover, the most influential energy amongst the 3 is spiritual energy. Therefore, due to this spiritual energy congestion Jin had experienced last time, his spiritual energy had increased, strengthening his 2 other powers as well. In consequence, the channels through which aura and mana flow in his body had increased in number. It was as if Jin had won the lottery without doing a single thing. Now that I've publicly revealed having reached 5-star at the age of 15, my siblings will start getting properly nervous here on out. Jin had made an incredible accomplishment. However, he wasn't strong enough to face his siblings yet. Excluding the Tana twins, the other flag bearers of the clan could easily trample on Jin if they ever had the chance to. It wasn't just Mew and Anon. There was Joshua, Siren's most likely successor, along with Jin's other older siblings who were aiming to take that position for themselves as well. They now had no choice but to keep an eye on Jin and his growth. The youngest was a thorn in the side of those who were aiming for the position of patriarch. Choosing Barasada during the selection ritual could be considered a coincidence. But revealing his true talents and gaining prominence was a completely different story. It might have been a good idea to stay low and hide my talents for now, but no. Had he revealed his abilities when he was 18, the candidates for the throne would have been less wary of him. However, Jin believed that he had benefited far more by doing the reveal today. From today onwards, people outside of the Runcandel clan will learn of me, of how I became a 5-star knight at the age of 15. Countless clans and alliances will come and take a look at me out of curiosity and wariness. My siblings won't be able to move or aim for my life recklessly due to the observant eyes on me. Moreover, his father, Siren Runcandel, would most definitely return to the Garden of Swords. He was currently thinking of having someone other than Joshua take over the clan, and was keeping an eye on all his children in the hopes of finding a better successor. Yet, all his children after Luna hadn't been able to satisfy him a single time. However, the only child whom he was content with, Luna, wasn't interested in the throne. In fact, she said that she didn't like this familial conflict and wished to simply observe from the sidelines. Therefore, no matter how strong she was, Siren judged that Luna wasn't suited to rule and lead the clan. He then designated his second child Joshua as his provisional successor, as he was the best alternative after Luna. Joshua was suited to lead the clan personality-wise. While he wasn't extremely satisfactory, he was decisive, level-headed, sharp like a blade, and had a powerful drive. Alternatively, if something ever happened to Joshua, Siren still had a third option. Siren's second son Deepu's, his second daughter Lunsha, or even his third daughter Mary were decent candidates for the throne as well. That was the order amongst the candidates for the Runcandel throne, which solidified over the years as no one stood out particularly. But now there's me. With Jin's arrival, the battlefield for the throne had an upheaval. Siren was someone who didn't care about age and gave opportunities to his children according to their accomplishments. Just like when he sent me on the special mission when I was still in the beginner class, my growth and achievement this time will definitely be reported to Father, and he'll issue some orders. Jin predicted that whatever Siren's orders were going to be, they would include two things. First was a trial. Siren would test Jin with the intention of checking whether the boy was able to overcome his age difference with his older siblings who were already candidates for the throne. Second was protection. Having revealed his true abilities, it was inevitable that Jin's older siblings would start attacking him personally. However, Siren didn't want Jin to be trampled on by his siblings before he could even test his youngest child. Jin was a special case. He was just far too young compared to his other siblings, which was why Siren would exceptionally intervene in his children's conflict. Gilly. Yes, young master. In the near future, many important clans and organizations will request a meeting with the Runcandel clan. They will want to see the new 15-year-old 5-star knight with their own eyes, since rumors of the youngest child of the Runcandels will spread throughout the world. The Ivliano clan of swordsmanship, the Kin clan of spearmanship, the Tuco clan of hand-to-hand combat, and all the other martial clans would want to see Jin. Even national organizations like the Vermont Empire's Imperial Guards and Special Forces, as well as the Dragon King Knights, would send some men. It was the same case for the armed forces around the world like the Hidden Palace, the Black King Mercenaries, and the Ghost Mercenaries. Geez, look at you bragging with such a smug face, kid. Do you think they've got nothing else to do but to come visit you? To those people, figuring out the changes and trends in the Runcandel clan is of the utmost importance. They're all expecting my achievements to bring change to the current hierarchy amongst the candidates for the throne, so they all need to come personally to check on me. Jin was certain about his predictions, not only because he was good at reading the political changes in the clan, but also because of a story he had heard from his past life. He had heard that when Luna became a 5-star knight at the age of 15 as well, countless people had gathered at the clan in order to see her. It was like a legend amongst his siblings. Geez, good for you. Nobody ever cares about a lowly black dragon like me. Yep, that's exactly right. Anyways, once the official request to visit the clan arrive, Father will return to the Garden of Swords. He'll probably start a banquet as well. I see. The Patriarch will vacate the Black Sea once again. I shall make preparations in advance. I'll leave that in your care, Gilly, and make sure to keep Murakin hidden away from the public. If he transforms into a human and sneaks into the banquet, we're done for. Do you understand? I'm not a kid. I can take care of mice. I will bear that in mind. Murakin glared at Gilly, but the nanny simply avoided making eye contact and looked away. 2 days later, the clan began receiving letters regarding the Runcandel's youngest child, just as Jin had predicted. As Jin had never shown himself to the public outside of the clan, the reporters and envoys were desperate to get more information about him. In fact, all that was known about him outside the clan was his age and his 5-star rank. The rich reporters and journalists bribed the servants of the Garden of Swords in order to get some insider information, whereas the skilled ones went to find the receptionist at the Mytel Kingdom's transfer gate and the Black King Mercenaries' Third Corps. Those two were the only group of people around the world who had met Jin in person. However, the receptionist was someone who cared for her life and didn't reveal her client's information, while the Black King Mercenaries absolutely detested journalists. Meanwhile, the less skilled reporters, in other words, the naive ones who didn't know much about the world, thought that the Runcandels had spread a fake rumor in order to gain some attention. Just what kind of person is Jin Runcandel? The reporters were all sighing and groaning to each other. The Garden of Swords wasn't a place mere reporters could set their foot into. All they could do was wait impatiently as they tried to make use of their connections with other clans, those that had enough influence to enter the Garden of Swords as visitors. And so, another week went by. It was now May 1795. Countless demands and requests to visit the Garden of Swords came rushing to the clan like a broken dam. Everything was going as Jin had predicted. It seems the butlers are extremely busy writing replies to all the requests these days, young master. When I asked Petro, he mentioned that even the Vermont imperial family sent an official letter. The imperial family? I didn't expect that. Those mystics couldn't hold back their curiosity either, it seems. I find it more mystical that you managed to predict the future so accurately, young Master Jin. Gilly smiled as she felt proud of the boy and continued speaking. Also, Guardian Knight Khan returned to the main house today and announced the Patriarch's decision. He will return in 1 month. The clan is now matching the timing of the visitors with the Patriarch's return. The clan was in an uproar both on the inside and outside due to Jin. However, there were no movements or odd actions from his siblings as of yet. They were simply going on missions or training as usual, and it was the same for Jin. But this wasn't a surprising outcome. Trying to attack or keep Jin in check while the entire clan's attention was on him was a stupid move. The moment they would try to keep him in check, they would be announcing to the world that they feared and or detested their youngest sibling. It would cause great damage to their reputation. But it wasn't as if all his siblings weren't willing to make this stupid move. Why, young master? The man who came running to Jin with a distressed expression was Petro, the second butler. As soon as he saw the butler's face, Jin knew the time had finally come. Elder sisters Mew and must have schemed something again. Petro's entire body was drenched in sweat. It appeared he had run across the enormous Garden of Swords to tell Jin of this urgent news. Take your time to catch your breath, Petro. Thank you very much. Phew, you have been assigned a new mission, young master. But the place you'll be dispatched to is... Where is it? The Colin Ruins. Huh, the Colin Ruins? Young master, the flag bearers have gone too far this time. The Colin Ruins are in Zipful territory. That is correct. The flag bearers have gone too far. Thus, Madame Rosa has become enraged. She has already summoned the flag bearers to admonish them. I believe young Master Jin should go see Madame Rosa as well. Jin calmly nodded and began making his way to the main building. There were a total of 5 flag bearers who came running to the main building with Rosa's summons. They were the 3rd son Ran, the 4th son Vigo, the 4th daughter Mew, the 5th daughter, and finally, the 2nd daughter Luncia. Rosa made them stand straight in a single file and glared at them with a dark, heavy gaze. The flurry of shouts and reprimands she had been hurling at them had calmed down a bit. But once Jin entered the room, she raised her voice again. How can you people who call themselves flag bearers mess up so badly? As Rosa let out a thunderous roar, the documents and pen holder on her table went flying in all 4 directions. In fact, the pen holder cracked and broke apart due to the energy in her voice. Hiya! She let out a deep sigh and turned to Jin. You've arrived? Yes, mother. His siblings' attention turned to him as well. Ran and Vigo's gazes were dyed in annoyance and irritation. Their reactions were natural as they weren't involved in the issuing of his mission. Mew and were openly showing their animosity towards Jin. Their lips were curled upwards, but their pupils were dyed red in bloodthirst, as if they were warning him they'd kill him if they ever had the chance. Meanwhile, Luncia had a calm bearing. She was merely curious to know if her youngest sibling, whom she hadn't seen in a long while, was truly a five-star night, as the rumors said. Have you heard the news? Your next mission will be at the Colin ruins. Yes, I've been told. I'm canceling that mission. You won't be going to Colin. Mother. Mew and Anne raised their voices simultaneously and took a couple of steps forward. You wenches only care about killing the youngest, don't you? Did gaining the petty authority and power of a flag bearer grant you non-existent balls to stand against your mother? Rosa looked down at her daughters with ice-cold eyes. However, the two daughters didn't let themselves get intimidated. Mother, is it really so strange that we're trying to kill the youngest? What? To be honest, I cannot understand why you try to protect the youngest so much. Mew stared at her mother in the eyes. Go on. I dare you to continue yapping with that pile. Have you lost your mind? Ever since we were born, you have merely watched us from the sidelines with father and even encouraged us to fight amongst each other, mother. Was that not because competition is a necessity in our family? She's right, mother. In fact, you must know how much everyone here has been oppressed and pressured by our older siblings while growing up. Back when I was in the intermediate class, I was also sent on highly difficult missions assigned to me by my older siblings. Dozens of times. A moment of silence followed. Mew and weren't completely in the wrong. Conflict and secret harassment between siblings in the Runcandel clan was inevitable. In fact, it was the fate of all Runcandel children. Moreover, Siren and Rosa never intervened to stop the bloodbath occurring amongst their children. Indeed, you two aren't wrong. Competition is necessary, and you can use whatever means at your disposal to come out on top. Rosa spoke with a soft smile. Mew and understood their mother's intentions. Be that as it may, did you two reach the 5-star stage by the age of 15? You two are different compared to the youngest. Had you two made the same achievements as him in your teenage years, I would have protected you as well. However, you didn't. Rosa openly revealed that she was giving Jin preferential treatment. In other words, you two weren't worthy of my protection and care. As a matter of fact, seeing how you two are now insolently talking back to me after becoming flag bearers, I don't regret never having protected you two. Mew and Anne's faces distorted as they blinked, dumbfounded. No matter how harsh of an environment the clan was and how cruel one's siblings were, every child in the world would be hurt after hearing such heart-wrenching words from their parents. You're correct, mother. I was being insensible and naive. Thank you for your guidance, mother. The two girls lowered their heads and turned around, exiting the room. Despite having turned their backs to Jin, their burning rage and hatred towards their youngest sibling could be distinguished more than ever. Luncia ran Vigo. Yes, mother, as Mew and Anne's fellow flag bearers, you three aren't guilt-free either. Especially you, Luncia. I'm very disappointed in you. You will need to reflect on your oversight for a while. Ran and Vigo, return one of your swords each. Luncia merely shrugged and went along with it, whereas Ran and Vigo protested. And mother, why you want us to return a sword? Are you dissatisfied? You should be glad it's only one sword. I personally would have preferred confiscating all the invaluable swords you two took from the clan's armory, so be grateful I didn't do that. The brothers couldn't say anything in return and lowered their heads. Ran and Vigo felt like they were being framed for a crime they hadn't committed, and obviously enough, their frustration and anger diverted to Jin. Our family is so messed up. Things are getting troublesome. Jin discreetly clicked his tongue and thought to himself. Rosa Runcandel, was she truly rebuking the flag bearers out of love for Jin? Jin was certain that it wasn't the case. Mother wants me to clash with my siblings far more fiercely and violently. She purposefully summoned elder sister Luncia and elder brothers Ran and Vigo, even though they're unrelated to this incident, in order to have them develop animosity towards me. Correct. Rosa had summoned 3 other flag bearers in addition to Mew and in order to test Jin. To be more precise, she was testing every single child in this room. She wanted to see how far she could push her children and whether they'd persistently try to tear each other apart. I wonder how the youngest will pull through this situation. He's a smart boy, so I'm sure he won't act conceited from here on out just because he thinks I'm favoring him. So what will he do? Rosa asked herself. She was excited and curious, but made sure to maintain the furious expression on her face. Would he pretend to defend his siblings and tell her to punish him instead? If he simply stood there with a content smile for having his mother on his side, then that was the end of it. While Jin was a rare genius for reaching 5-star at 15 years old, if that was the extent of his reaction and intelligence, then Rosa was planning on erasing all her interest in her youngest son immediately. Needless to say, even if she were disappointed, he would still be her beloved youngest son. He would just be eliminated from the list of candidates for the succession. If Jin did nothing when she gave him an advantage, Rosa would judge that he wasn't suited to lead the Runcandel clan. Mother, speak freely, Jin. Rosa spoke in a low tone, hiding her excitement. I quite like the mission elder sisters assigned to me. Do you even know where the Colin ruins are? Rosa sneered. Yes, it's in Zipful territory, and the Runcandels once tried to invade and capture it, but failed to do so. It happened long before I was born, though, so you are aware. Back then, Elder Tellot went to battle with 30 Guardian Knights, but faced a predicament. It's now a tourist spot, but the Zipfels are still greatly involved with it. You won't be able to do anything even if you go there. The mission that was assigned to Jin was theft. He had to steal some of the ancient relics the Zipfels were excavating from the Colin ruins. Jin hadn't checked the list of items he had to steal yet, but there were probably at least 3 relics on it. We can't verify that if I don't head there. While it's a dangerous place, I do not believe it's an unreasonable mission. Don't you think elder sisters assigned this mission to me as they believed I was skilled enough for it? What reckless bravado. That, or you're trying to test your mother. Reckless bravado. It wasn't a bad reaction, but it wasn't what Rosa was hoping for. Moreover, if we suddenly change the issuing of the mission, we will be showing our clansmen how lax and careless our clan system is. No clansman would question the Runcandels just because of something like that. Your sisters were simply trying to harm you. And since they couldn't attack you physically, they took advantage of their authority as flag bearers. That is exactly what I mean, Mother. Jin grinned brightly. I do not plan on backing away from this fight. If I were to duel elder sisters right here, right now, I will definitely lose miserably. However, if I successfully accomplish my mission, I would be able to deal them a powerful blow. Rosa's eyes glittered. In other words, I have a slight chance of winning this fight. I know it would be wiser for me to back away now, develop my strength, and defeat them in a duel in a few years. But I simply cannot wait that long, as elder sisters are getting on my nerves. You could easily die at the Colin ruins with the smallest of mistakes. Are you really confident in yourself? Yes, and if I return successfully from the mission, I'd like to be awarded the swords that were confiscated from elder brothers. Since you judged this mission to be extremely dangerous, Mother, I wish to be rewarded according to the amount of risk I took. What was that? Ren and Vigo spontaneously glared at Jin, whereas Rosa hid her delighted smile. The youngest was provoking his older siblings just as she had hoped for, as if he had read her mind. Brother, why are you saying you'd like to take the swords we're returning? Good, I'll allow it. Rosa interrupted Vigo's remark. Nevertheless, Ren sighed deeply before giving a piece of his own mind. If you desire to gain some top-notch swords, I can simply give you one of the weapons I own. But give up on this mission. Your achievements have spread around the world already, so you must remain alive until Father returns to the garden. If Siren returned to the Garden of Swords in 1 month, and Jin wasn't present, then all the guests who came to visit the Runcandel clan would be disappointed. Thus, people would raise suspicions and say that the 5-star 15-year-old knight was a false rumor started by the Runcandels. Some would even believe that the clan tried to cover up the false rumor by saying the child had died on a mission right before the visit. Ran acted as if he were worried about this outcome, but Jin tilted his head in confusion. You're being hypocritical, elder brother Ran. If that were such an important problem you were wary of, you should have stopped elder sisters from assigning this mission to me in the first place. Ran was pretending to be generous and kind-hearted, but Jin didn't buy it. Ran and Vigo hadn't opposed Mew, and when they decided to assign the Colin Ruins mission to Jin. Jin could see that Ran was blatantly acting broad-minded in order to gain their mother's approval. That must be quite humiliating, Ran. You should have stayed silent like your elder sister instead. Ran couldn't stop his ears from turning bright red as their mother laughed. I'm quite curious to know whether the youngest will be able to steal his brother's swords now. I'll be watching carefully to see whether it was just an empty provocation or whether he'll be able to make it a reality. You may all take your leave now. Once all her children left the room, Rosa propped her chin on her hand. I trampled on the other's pride so that the youngest doesn't turn out like Luna, but it seems that was unnecessary. The youngest seemed to be famished for conflict. Today, it was a verbal battle and not a physical one, but he had completely dominated the flow of the conversation, overwhelming his siblings who were several years older than him. Siren will be happy to see the youngest growth so far when he's back. Of course, such a thing wouldn't happen if Jin didn't return alive from the Colin ruins. As soon as they exited the building, Ran and Vigo immediately returned to their rooms. Luncia hesitated to talk with the youngest for a bit, but simply returned to her room as if she couldn't be bothered to do so. Do you actually think you'll be so lucky this time around as well? Miu spoke up without even looking her brother in the eyes. She and were standing against the wall, waiting for him to come out. Who knows? Elder sisters might not know this well, but I'm actually pretty unlucky in life. This is the last time you'll ever act so easygoing. The mission isn't a solo mission. You won't be feeling so lonely on your way to your destination. Thank you for your concern, elder sisters. Well then, I shall see you another time. The two women glared at the boy's back as he strided away until he disappeared from their sights. There were 3 other cadets who were assigned the Colin Ruins mission alongside Jin. Kajin Ramello, Male Haas, and Rima Haas. All 3 were part of Miu and Anne's faction. The Haas brothers were slightly weaker than Kajin, but were still bona fide 5-star knights. Young Master, allow me to apologize for my transgression a few days ago. I will make sure not to disappoint you anymore during the upcoming mission. It is an honor to be given the chance to work alongside young Master Jin. The day before their departure, Kajin and the Haas brothers came to find Jin. Their behavior had made a full 180 compared to a few days ago. Their sarcastic remarks had completely vanished and had been replaced by courteous and submissive attitudes. Jin wore a wide smile to show his satisfaction. Indeed, the past is in the past. Let's turn the page now. I'll be in your care from here on out. Thank you very much, young master. Thank you very much. Once the 3 of them left the room, Murakin leaped onto Jin's lap. It's because they kept talking behind my back without having the courage to confront me that they were abandoned by elder sisters. Sending those 3 to the Colin ruins is basically being sent to die. Backstabbing me during the mission must be their desperate last-ditch effort. Jin was sure of himself. Miu and Anne. Those sly foxes must have ordered their lackeys to kill Jin during the mission. He was also certain that his sisters had promised to look after their family if they successfully killed Jin and also died bravely on the battlefield. The boy had witnessed Miu and deal with people using this exact same method in his past life countless times. Meow. The cat sitting on his lap laughed out loud. They had to use a transfer gate and travel on land to reach the Colin ruins. The Colin ruins originally had around a couple of thousands of natives living in villages. However, the Zipfuls discovered the land several hundreds of years ago and took control of the area, so the ruins became a part of the Palon kingdom. Afterwards, most of the natives were slaughtered and the survivors were enslaved. The descendants of the natives who are still living in Colin to this day appear to be respected by the Zipfuls, but they gnash their teeth at the clan of magicians. However, there was nothing the descendants could do. While they appeared respected, they were still slaves. Moreover, the rest of the world didn't really care about the lives and rights of the Colin natives. The Zipfuls spared the descendants and allowed them to remain in Colin with the excuse of preserving the land in its original state. However, it was all an act where they were trying to redeem themselves from their horrible past deeds. As he thought about this sad truth, Jin frowned deeply. The weak being trampled on by the strong is a common occurrence around the world, but the Zipfuls really went too far back then. Originally, the Zipfuls weren't the type to commit such massacres. They normally prefer to conquer new lands peacefully and reasonably, while trying to gain the natural respect and loyalty of the conquered. The Zipfels were far more advanced in terms of their public image and relations compared to the Runcandels. In fact, ruling by force was the Runcandel style. If so, why did the Zipfels suppress the Colin natives in such a violent and cruel way back then? Jin knew the answer to this question. It was because of the mirror-like artifact the natives hid away. The Zipfels had some vague knowledge of this artifact when they discovered the island, so they trampled on the natives in order to find it. Currently, the existence of this ancient mirror was top-secret information that hadn't spread outside of the Zipfel clan. However, before Jin's regression, the entire world came to know of this mirror by the time he was 27. One brave journalist wrote an article about this ancient artifact the Zipfels had recently found. The journalist even recorded the details of the artifact's excavation site. The natives who bore a grudge against the Zipfels informed the journalist about how the clan had robbed them of their divine artifact and the history of the oppression. Later on, people started calling that mirror the Fountain of Mana. The mirror artifact, the Fountain of Mana, had a simple yet terrifying effect. It could increase your mana just by staring into it. Needless to say, there were some extreme side effects, but the artifact's value and benefits were still considerable even when taking those into account. The limit of the increase in mana using the fountain was up to 7-star. Thanks to the item, the Zipfels were able to nurture and develop countless 7-star magicians as if they were a factory. And once these mass-produced magicians made their appearance in the world, numerous aspirants aiming to become magicians joined their clan. Thus, the already powerful Zipfel clan began leaving the Runcandels behind in the dust and solidified their standing on the continent, while putting pressure on their enemy clan of swordsmen. This time, I won't let those Zipfel bastards get the mirror in their hands. As one would expect, he wasn't planning on stealing the artifact while oppressing the natives like the Zipfels had done. However, for the price of suppressing the natives for several hundreds of years, he was planning on stopping the Zipfels from gaining more power using the fountain. There was no need to hurry. According to his knowledge from his past life, the Zipfels needed another 10 years or more in order to find a mirror. Thus, Jin only needed to steal it before that day came. We will arrive soon, young master. Jin's strides came to a halt. They were walking down a mountainous road in disguises and masks. This place is the Zipfel magicians' lodgings. This one is for independent magicians. And the relics we must find are here, in the third warehouse. Kajin spread open a map of the Colin ruins and pointed at each vital location. Are you certain that the items are in the third warehouse? We must hope so. If it isn't the case, then our chances at succeeding this mission will drop to 0. There were a total of 4 relics they had to steal, 3 slabs of stones the size of their palms, and 1 bronze bowl. They were worthless items for most people, but for historians, these items were far more valuable than gold. The cadets had to sneak inside the warehouse, steal the relics, and return to the clan. Sneaking inside the warehouse wasn't such a difficult task. The third warehouse didn't contain precious artifacts, so the security was lax. In fact, the warehouse was open to visitors during the day. However, the problem was returning safely to the clan. No matter how worthless the items in a warehouse are, I'm certain there'll be several layers of protective barriers around the building. It's almost impossible to enter the warehouse without getting detected with our current party. The Zipfel magicians weren't pushovers. If the third warehouse was attacked, they'd be dispatched and would arrive within 5 minutes. Obviously, they'd also capture and punish all intruders. Due to the rich and curious historians making a request to the clan, it seems the 4 of us may die tonight trying to complete our tasks. No matter what happens, the 3 of us will lay our lives down to protect you, young master. Kajin spoke with resolute eyes, and the Haas brothers nodded with determined looks. Their acting was pitiful. As he chuckled in his mind, Jin took out some beef jerky from his pocket. Laying your lives down to protect me. That's good to hear. Have some jerky and rest for a bit. We'll commence the operation in an hour. Understood. The 3 cadets eagerly received the jerky. Chomp, munch, nibble, chew, gulp. As soon as he saw them swallow their food, Jin immediately spat out the jerky he was chewing on. Young master? Huh. The 3 of them realized that something was wrong, but it was already too late. The jerky was coated with a sleep-inducing drug that could make even a 7-star knight fall asleep in a couple of seconds. Kajin and the Haas brothers were already feeling drowsy and were barely staying standing. Don't worry, it wasn't poisoned. What are you? You can't. Thump, flop, thud. All three fell over, entering the dreamland. Jin dug a hole in the ground and pushed them inside, and proceeded to cover up the hole with leaves. They were unlikely to wake up for another 24 hours, and when they did, the mission would already be finished. You can't, he said, as if I could keep traitors who were planning on backstabbing me by my side when entering enemy territory. In fact, had they not acted so polite, Jin would have been less suspicious of them. However, during their entire trip here, the three cadets were constantly currying favors with Jin. They were planning on having Jin let down his guard, and when the opportunity arose, they'd slice his throat with no hesitation. But Jin had seen through their utterly predictable strategy. It wasn't as if he couldn't understand and sympathize with those three. It was normal for a dog to follow its owner's orders, especially when they were facing a crisis after having made several mistakes. However, they had chosen the worst opponent. As he was living in the Runcandel clan for the second time, Jin could not be tricked by his elder sister's sloppy schemes. Moreover, I can't use magic or spiritual power while these three are watching me. Brazenly attacking the warehouse, while being fully aware of the magic barrier protecting, it was suicide if Jin didn't use magic or spiritual power. If the four of them tried to infiltrate the warehouse, the spell would definitely detect them. However, it was a different story if Jin sneaked in alone. Well then, shall we get going? Jin wore his mask properly and headed down the mountain road. The evening breeze blowing between the trees and branches was refreshing. The Colin ruins were shaped like an enormous ellipse. The important excavation site was located at the center, whereas the third warehouse was on the outskirts. It was now 6 p.m., and the ruins had closed. The path to the warehouse's entrance was quiet and dull. Jin lay down on the grass in the forest from where he could see the third warehouse. As he observed the area, he noticed people walking by from time to time. They were magicians dispatched here to investigate the ruins. Fortunately, Jin couldn't see anyone at the 5-star stage or above. Additionally, the guards standing by the warehouse's main and back entrances weren't magicians, just as Jin had predicted. They seemed to be 1-star or 2-star warriors at best. This didn't come as a surprise. They had no need to assign magicians, expensive and valuable manpower, just to guard a warehouse of little importance. The guards seemed bored and kept yawning as they waited for time to pass. They even joked between each other at times, laughing and chuckling. Once the magicians in the area were at a proper distance, Jin dashed towards the warehouse's main entrance. So remember that girl I met last night? Oh yeah, how far did you two go? HM, come on, spill the beans. Geez, should I really say it? You might punch me out of jealousy, LMAO. Oh well, so what happened is, Kirk, one mercenary fainted after taking Jin's punch to the chin. The other guard who was waiting for the rest of the story immediately thrust his spear towards the intruder. Jin swiftly turned around and avoided the spearhead and used his momentum to jab his opponent in the throat with his elbow. The second mercenary's eyes lost their focus and flopped onto the ground. Maybe I should have waited for him to end the story before attacking them. Jin chuckled before picking up the two unconscious bodies, got them on their feet, and leaned them against the wall. By sticking the spears between their legs, they could somehow stay upright. This way, they appeared to be properly standing guard from afar. Jin rummaged through their pockets and found the keys to the warehouse door. The lock on the door was an ordinary one without any spells protecting it. That was how much the Zipfuls didn't care about the third warehouse. No wonder the historians fearlessly requested the Runcandels to rob these relics. Kriawak. There was no way of repressing the sound of the metal door grinding open. Jin hesitated to use some noise-canceling or noise-reduction magic spells, but decided not to. If there were a magician nearby, the chances of his mana getting detected were high. Before entering the warehouse, Jin observed the interior. After a short while, he noticed a certain familiar magic circle on the floor right in front of the door. Isn't this the magic circle of blood and barrier? It was the same magic circle as the one he had seen several years ago when he first sneaked inside the underground chambers beneath the storm castle. By dropping a few droplets of human blood on it, he could easily neutralize the effects of the circle. The defensive magic circle protecting an unimportant zipful warehouse was the same as the one protecting a secret chamber only the Runcandel flag-bearers could enter. If the public ever came to learn of this truth, the clan of swordsmen would become a laughingstock. The magic circle of blood and barrier can recognize the blood of a human, a monster, or a plague-stricken human. As long as it was someone healthy, the blood of any human was enough to neutralize it. Jin approached the unconscious yet standing mercenaries again. He then used his dagger to lightly cut the tip of one's finger and caught a few drops of blood with his palm. Afterwards, he sprinkled the blood onto the magic circle. Jin had used the mercenaries' blood in order to avoid getting caught after he accomplished his mission. If the Zipfuls came to investigate the intrusion, they might believe that the magic circle had been neutralized due to the mercenaries' mistake. The first protective spell was easily dealt with. Let's search for the relics now. Suddenly, the magic circle glowed bright red and let out a sharp squeal. The flustered Jin flinched in panic, but soon calmed down and looked back at the bloodstain on his palm. The stain had been made using the unconscious mercenary's blood. In other words, it was definitely human blood. Nevertheless, the magic circle of blood and barrier had reacted to it. In other words, either the mercenary was currently afflicted by the plague, KRR, or the mercenary wasn't a human. What the foo? Jin abruptly turned around and unsheathed his dagger. The unconscious mercenaries were regaining control over their body. Their eyes are red. Moreover, the two of them were growling like beasts and breathing heavily inconsistently. It sounded almost like the breathing pattern of an orc or a troll. Jin had no time to ask himself how this had happened. The steel armors of these ex-human mercenaries were inflating. The rapidly swelling muscles on the inside were tearing the metal apart. Crack! The moment the armor tore apart, Jin reflexively cast a spell. Silent Wind. A gust of mana instantly engulfed the inside of the warehouse and formed a thin hemispherical layer. It was a 4-star spell that reduced all noises in a radius of 15 meters. Jin had decided not to use magic earlier, as he didn't want to risk getting detected by the magicians in the area. But the situation had changed. He couldn't avoid fighting the mercenaries who had transformed into monsters. They were already reaching their hands out toward Jin. Their fingers had grown sharp and long claws, just like those of the Red Tiger tribe. I can only hope the magicians out there don't notice us. Cror. His two enemies were already pouncing towards him simultaneously. Jin didn't even have time to unsheath Bradamanti. The monsters were swinging their arms one after another, taking turns so that their target had no time to breathe. Swish! The claws sharply tore the air as they drew arcs. Jin narrowly dodged the attacks by crouching down and stabbed one of the monsters in the ribs with his dagger. He had aimed at the heart, but the monster had barely managed to avoid getting killed by twisting its body. However, Jin definitely felt the sensation of flesh being torn and bones breaking. Grah! The monster let out a horrible shriek. It didn't appear to be a fatal injury. The monster didn't bother removing the dagger in its torso and continued swinging its claws. Fortunately, Jin made use of this short breather to create some distance between them and unsheathed Bradamanti. As he hurriedly enveloped the blade in aura, the dark warehouse was brightened up a little. The monsters seemed to have sensed that aura was a dangerous power. As Jin adjusted the distance between them while keeping his sword straight, the black fur covering the monsters' bodies stood on end. KRRRR. Croc. The wounded monster belatedly removed the dagger in its chest. Seeing what happened afterwards, Jin couldn't help but let his face show his shock. They can even regenerate? The monster's deep gash in its chest was rapidly healing and closing. The dark red blood quickly stopped gushing out after a couple of seconds. This sort of high-speed regeneration could only be seen in high-ranking and powerful monsters. However, Jin's opponents weren't your typical naturally born monsters. These enemies were undoubtedly humans even a minute ago. With every passing second, all sorts of thoughts and hypotheses passed through Jin's mind. However, he didn't have the necessary knowledge to understand exactly how this mysterious and freaky incident had happened. He had never seen anything like this in his total 43 years of life. Fortunately, while he couldn't understand how it had happened, Jin could somewhat grasp the fundamentals behind it, thanks to his life as a magician in his past life. It's highly likely these are living golems created through forbidden magic. Those zipful bastards. Are they using the Colin ruins as an experimental facility for forbidden magic? Swoosh. The monsters resumed their flurry of attacks. Jin could only narrowly evade the attacks earlier as he was taken by surprise. But now that he had regained his calm, his enemies' movements appeared clumsy. They had the strength and speed of low-leveled 4-star fighters. However, there was a vast difference between a trained 4-star knight and monsters that only had 4-star physical abilities. Jin easily parried and dodged the monster's claws and counterattacked. It's not too difficult facing them. Whenever Jin made a feint or moved irregularly, the monsters fell for it each time. He could see their feet getting tangled up, resulting in the monsters losing their balance. There are 3 places the core could be located: the heart, head, or lower abdomen. When it comes to these magical weapons called golems, they never stop moving no matter how much they get wrecked. In fact, Jin had sliced one of the monster's wrist and shoulder, yet there was no change in its behavior. On the other hand, if their cores get destroyed, it's over for them. This was the case even for these living golems that were made with forbidden magic. Stab. Jin backstepped and changed his attack pattern, easily piercing one in the head. The aura surrounding his sword was spinning rapidly, so there was a large hole the size of a fist in the monster's head. So it's not the head. Had Jin fought like he was facing humans, he would have been in a predicament just now. After inflicting a deadly blow to one of the enemies, most fighters would have shifted their focus on the remaining foe. However, the golem with a hole in its head continued swiping its claws. Its speed and power hadn't been affected a single bit. Rather, it became more violent and aggressive. Jin spun around to dodge the attacks and thrust his sword again, this time in the lower abdomen. But this time, he raised his arm with the blade until he reached the heart. This sort of attack would have been nigh impossible for ordinary people. It was at times like this when Jin was grateful for his Runcandel bloodline for giving him a blessed body with superhuman strength. Skryek. The disgusting sound of the monster's flesh ripping apart and its rib cage shattering echoed. Once he retracted his blade, Jin realized that the core was located at the heart. Instead of an actual beating heart, there was a ball of blue mana at the center of the chest. However, it was a completely different-looking core than what Jin was familiar with. Instead of mana, it almost looked like a big glass marble filled with some blue liquid. Moreover, it was incomparably harder than what a normal human's heart was supposed to be. Through the recoil Jin felt when cutting the core apart, he realized that he had barely managed to break it despite the 5-star aura covering his sword. PFFFCHD. The solid-looking ball of mana burst, and a terrible stench spread in the air. The dead monster was now slowly transforming back into a human. It couldn't turn back into its previous form perfectly, as the swollen skin and ripped muscles were irreversible. Nevertheless, the shriveled-up corpse on the ground was undoubtedly that of a human. As soon as he saw that, a complicated sentiment grew within Jin, and rage suddenly began boiling in his heart. How dare they do something like this to a fellow human being? Rage towards the Zipfuls. The remaining monster pounced on Jin as if in response to the boy's anger. Jin had yet to fix his posture after finishing off the first foe. Scree. Its claws slammed and scratched against Bradamanti, creating an unpleasant sound. Jin placed his right foot back and pushed with all his strength to stand his ground. His foe's claws weren't as tough as Bradamanti's blade. While it seemed stronger than ordinary steel, it couldn't compare to the blade of a powerful, ancient sword from thousands of years ago. Crack! As the two opponents clashed, 5 claws broke away, disrupting the power balance. The monster lost its footing and fell face first to the floor. Jin stamped on the back of its head and stabbed it in the heart from above. He felt the solid ball of mana break at the tip of his sword. The fallen monster's body trembled, and soon enough, it returned to its human form as well. Phew! Only then could Jin finally sigh and relax. He looked at his surroundings and saw that the floor was drenched in the monster's dark red blood. The Silent Wind spell he had cast earlier was still present. Fortunately, it seemed the magicians in the area hadn't sensed the usage of magic. Keiki. Jin suddenly heard a voice. It came from the fallen monster. No, from the human writhing on the floor. Kill me. He hurriedly crouched down and examined the second victim. Surprisingly, he was still breathing. Barely, but breathing. However, he still had a somewhat inhuman appearance. It was obvious their entire bodies had swollen and torn beyond their limits. Jin soon came to the conclusion that he couldn't be saved. He had countless questions to ask. How and why had they become living golems? Who was behind this? How they had become the Zipful's experimental subjects. However, the mercenary had no strength left to speak. All Jin could do was liberate him from the pain and agony. Stab. Jin pierced the man in his disturbingly skinny neck, and the victim closed his eyes peacefully. Jin also closed his eyes for a moment and lifted his head. He did not know of their circumstances, but no human in the world wished to become a living golem willingly, especially if they were made to transform into monsters and were treated as expendables. A flame burned in Jin's eyes as he ground his teeth. But this wasn't the moment to lose his cool. An unexpected incident had occurred, through which Jin witnessed the horrible acts committed by the Zipfuls behind the scenes. And now, Jin was suspicious of his elder sisters, wondering if they were aware of this truth when sending him on this mission. However, he still had a task to complete. He couldn't just go back home and tell his siblings, "I couldn't finish the mission because a monster attacked me." Otherwise, his entire clan would mock him. And even if the Runcandels decided to bear the disgrace and publicize the details of this mission, about the horrible experiments being secretly performed in the Zipful clan, nothing would change. The Runcandels could demand the Vermont Empire to perform an official investigation of the Zipfuls, but the clan of magicians would never admit to having used forbidden magic. Creating living golems was a terrible crime. Simply finding signs of living golems was more than enough to pressure the Empire to do a formal investigation. However, the Zipfuls could just feign innocence even if conclusive evidence were to be found. In that case, no one would be able to hold them responsible for this crime. That was how much power and authority the Zipfuls wielded. First, I should take some broken shards of the ball of mana and quickly finish my mission. After a while, Jin regained his composure and picked up a few pieces of the lump of mana. He then walked to the warehouse in trance and checked the situation outside. The magicians aren't making any moves. In other words, most of the magicians here don't know of these living golems and were just told that the warehouse was just an ordinary one. If the magicians knew that living golems were placed as guards outside this building, the security here wouldn't be so lax. There would be at least 27-star magicians constantly keeping an eye on this place. In other words, not every personnel stationed at the Colin Ruins were involved with the use of forbidden magic in the clan. I just need to steal the relics and escape as originally planned. Jin carefully dispelled the Silent Wind spell he had cast and searched around the warehouse. Finding 3 slabs of stone was a piece of cake. They were all stored away on the first floor of the warehouse. He also found a bronze bowl very quickly. TL/N. Final reminder to people living in countries where you have a ground floor. Korea calls the lowest floor the first floor, like the USA. Keep it in mind when you see another X floor in the future in this novel. However, unlike the slabs of stone, the bronze bowl was protected by a complex spell. It was set to activate when the bowl was removed from its display case. This entire protective spell was the reason why the mission's difficulty was so high. The standard procedure would be to spend several hours trying to dispel the magic, like untying a string knot, but Jin sheathed his sword and gathered mana in both his hands. I'll steal it using a more extreme method. Since there are already 2 living golems lying here as corpses, no matter what crazy thing I do in this building today. Whoosh! The mana in his hands gained a fire attribute. But Jin then infused the mana with spiritual energy. The flame mixed with darkness projected large shadows in the room. The Zipfuls will have no choice but to sweep it under the rug. The ancient relics he had to steal were merely stone slabs and 1 bronze bowl. Even if those were stolen, the Zipfuls had nothing to worry about. Nevertheless, the Zipfuls would normally do their utmost when trying to find the culprit, as the clan's dignity was on the line. However, the situation was different if you added living golems created with forbidden magic into the equation. They would have to conceal the incident and let no rumors spread at all costs. Flame explosion. Therefore, causing a commotion would actually benefit Jin when escaping. He planned on lighting a fire that engulfed the entire building and escaping while hiding his body inside the flames. Whoosh! The burning balls of mana in his hands floated in the air. They glowed bright scarlet as spiritual energy had amplified them. Once the preparations were done, the 2 balls of mana exploded. Boom! The inside of the warehouse was engulfed in flames in mere instants, and the ceiling collapsed due to the explosion. Keying. The protection spells cast on all the items and relics display cases activated simultaneously. The shrilling noises resounded everywhere in the warehouse. However, Jin ignored the spells and simply grabbed the bronze bowl and quickly left the front door. The Zipfuls were probably going to disguise this incident as an accidental fire outbreak. Just what on earth do you 2 think you're doing? Thwack! Luna aggressively slapped 2 women. The strength of a 9-star knight was nothing to scoff at, even if it were a simple slap. The 2 victims let out short groans which were barely audible due to the loud smack. In fact, they were sent back flying from the overwhelming force. Boom! The 2 women slammed into the wall behind them and trembled. They were mute in Anne. The instant they got slapped, they protected their bodies with aura. However, the shock was so strong that they couldn't avoid coughing up blood. You sent him to Zipful territory? Mew, he's 10 years younger than you. Have you lost your mind? Luna had just returned to the Garden of Swords after leaving to deal with some personal issues. As soon as she arrived home, she summoned her 2 little sisters who had assigned Jin his most recent mission. The girls couldn't even look their sister in the eyes. Luna wasn't just their eldest sibling to them. She was an existence they feared more than their father at times. Get up. The sisters stood up with unsteady steps. These 2 were also Luna's youngest siblings like Jin, her own flesh and blood. Seeing their lowered gazes and trembling, Luna pitied them a little, but she had decided to give them a stern warning today, no matter what. Why did you do it? Mute, Annan didn't answer for a while and kept their heads down. It wasn't because they had nothing to say. They were feeling bitter towards their eldest sister because she already knew the answer to that question. That it was because of the traditional familial conflict, the battle for hegemony, where children fought between each other for a higher standing in the clan. Elder sister Luna, are you seriously asking that question because you don't know the answer? Mew spoke up with difficulty, to which Luna snickered. So what if I really didn't know the answer? You're not saying that a flag bearer of the clan is now waging war against their youngest brother who's still in the intermediate class, are you? The 2 sisters couldn't say anything in return and trembled. They felt embarrassed. While the battle for hegemony was a long-lasting tradition in the Runcandel clan, a flag bearer confronting a yet-to-be flag bearer was a complete mismatch. Flag bearers fighting other flag bearers, and cadets fighting other cadets. That was the unwritten rule of the battle for hegemony in the Runcandel clan. While the children didn't have to follow the rule at all times, Mew and had taken it one step too far with their recent actions. Luna looked down at her siblings for a moment before opening her mouth. Before one could react, her look of disdain had changed into that of murderous intent. Learn to be ashamed. The fact that you 2 are flag bearers of this clan is a disgrace. It's humiliating for me. Elder sister. The younger sisters raised their voices at the same time. However, Luna paid no heed to that and smirked. What? Do you think I'm exaggerating? Is it unpleasant getting mocked by me? Did I hurt your pride as flag bearers? You've never gotten involved in the conflicts of the clan, so what right do you have to say all tea? Had you confronted the youngest and won, I wouldn't have gone this far. What do you mean? Mew, and Anne's eyes widened. You've already lost against him. The youngest returned from the Colin ruins after completing his mission. Jin arrived not long ago and went to report to Mother. I ran into him on my way home and verified his success with my own 2 eyes. The 2 girls bit down on their lips. Do you understand why I told you to be ashamed now? You 2 ended up attaching wings on the youngest back while trying to trample on him. I wonder whether there's ever been any flag bearer in history who lost this miserably after confronting their youngest sibling. Luna continued, talking sarcastically, and her younger sister's ears turned bright red. On one hand, they couldn't handle this humiliation. On the other, they were also terrified. Mew and wouldn't be able to lay a finger on Jin for a while. Their plan of destroying the youngest before he could fully develop had gone up in flames. The sisters weren't confident that they'd be able to defeat Jin after he fully matured. In a few years, the youngest would start getting his revenge against them. As they feared the future, a freezing chill ran down their spines. They could only stare into the emptiness in stupefaction as they turned around to exit Luna's room. Luna spoke up one final time before they could leave. From what I've observed so far, the youngest isn't a merciful child. You 2 should be careful from here on out. Do you still have more mockery left to throw at us, elder sister? Luna wore a bitter smile on her face. No, I'm saying this because I'm truly concerned for you. Our relationship may have gone astray sometime in the past, but you 2 are still my little sisters. Mew and left without saying anything. Luna stared at the door for a while after their exit and sighed deeply. Clack! As she sat back down at her desk, a teacup was placed in front of her. Taemyun, her nanny who was waiting in the room next door, had returned to Luna's room. Ah, thanks, nanny. Ho-ho, I thought that you had relapsed into your period of adolescence when you came home and immediately pummeled your siblings, milady. Adolescence? At my age? As if. It's because your teenage years were quite memorable. Sigh. Still, I'm worried about ladies Mew and Anne. Considering the 13th young master's personality, I'm sure he won't forget what happened even in the distant future. Do you also think that they won't be able to compete with Jin, nanny? I believe that in another 5 years, they won't be able to rival young Master Jin even in a formal duel. Considering that, ladies Mew and have less than 5 years left to live. Don't talk about such gruesome things. They're still our flesh and blood. If the youngest kills them once he's older, it gives me shivers just thinking of it. Speaking of which, have you looked into what we were talking about last time, Nanny? By what we were talking about last time, Luna meant the incident when someone attempted to assassinate Jin in the Storm Castle. She had asked her nanny to look into their other siblings to find out who was the culprit behind the attempt. Technically speaking, it was a curse instead of an assassination attempt, but Luna didn't know about that. Moreover, she had misunderstood the situation. When Jin brought it up, she believed that he was around 5 or 6 years old. However, he was actually a 1-year-old baby when someone had attempted to cast the bladed illusion curse on him. This was because Jin hadn't mentioned that he still remembered everything from back when he was an infant. Yes, first of all, the culprits aren't ladies Mew and whom you pummeled earlier. Back then, they were still in the intermediate class, so it wasn't difficult to dig up information about them. That makes sense. I'm pretty certain it's not Mary or Yona either. Same with the Tana twins. Then the remaining suspects are young masters Joshua, Deepu's, Ran, Vigo, and Lady Luncia. Except for young masters Ran and Vigo, I cannot carelessly investigate the others. Right, Joshua, Deepu's, and Luncia's standings are already established and stable. Things can get troublesome if we investigate them recklessly. Then should I begin with young masters Ran and Vigo for now? Luna pondered for a moment and tapped on the table with her finger. No, let's just keep an eye on everyone for now. If we keep poking our heads in everyone's affairs, you might get in danger, Nanny. A wise decision. Although there was an assassination attempt back in the Storm Castle, young Master Jin is growing properly, so I believe there is no need to worry too much now. No matter who the culprit is, they must know that I'm looking after Jin now. They won't make a move carelessly anymore. Anyways, Thank you for your help so far, Nanny. It was my pleasure. Should I prepare your meal now? Yeah, some alcohol as well. The usual. Rosa had myriads of questions she wanted to ask her youngest son when he returned after accomplishing his mission. However, she didn't express them out loud. Mummet and the Colin ruins. Everyone had expected him to fail, but each time, he returned triumphant and proud. Was he blessed by the heavens? Or did he receive the help of a third party each time? Nobody knew the answer. But with this mission, Rosa was certain that it was the latter. There's an exceptional expert supporting the youngest from shadows, and the youngest is using that to his advantage to complete his missions. Accomplishing one's missions with the help of another went against the unwritten rule of the clan. The only help one could ask for during a difficult mission was reinforcements from the clan. However, Rosa decided not to question her son nor to blame him. Soon, countless influential envoys from all around the world would come visit the Garden of Swords just to have a look at the youngest. Siren would host a banquet, and the star of the show would be Jin, even if he had gotten the help of a third party from outside the clan without informing them. The most important fact was that he had returned alive from mission. Rosa could always reprimand her son on a later date at an appropriate moment after having gathered enough evidence. Good work. No need to go report to the flag bearers. Go take a good rest for today. I'll inform them about your return. Thank you very much, Mother. As soon as he exited the main building where Rosa's office was located, Jin sensed gazes on him. Cadets showed admiration in their eyes. Guardian Knights wore looks of astonishment, whereas flag bearers had looks of contempt and disgust. Mother and my siblings must think I received the help of someone else to complete my missions. Well, that wasn't his problem. Jin didn't plan on resolving this misunderstanding for now. Everything would be uncovered in the future when he reveals his true powers and declares himself a magic swordsman who had contracted with Soderette. As soon as Jin entered his room, Gilly ran up to him and hugged him tightly. When he felt her tears on his cheek, Jin realized how worried Gilly had been for him. I'm all right, Gilly. I'm strong now. I might even win against you in a duel in the near future if I went all out. If something terrible had happened to you, I would have done everything to get revenge on the ladies at the expense of my own life, young master. Geez, don't talk about such scary things, Strawberry Pie. You're too hot-blooded. Isn't it good now that he's back with us safe and sound? Give me a minute, Gilly. Mirakin, take a look at this. Jin took out the glass bottle in which he had put the shards of the living golem's core. It's the heart of a living golem. You were lucky, kid. Seeing how you're unscathed, this one must have been a failure. Did you find it at the Colin ruins? The two guards positioned outside the warehouse suddenly transformed into monsters and attacked me. They regenerated no matter where I cut them, but I managed to kill them by destroying the cores in their chests. As Jin explained the situation, Gilly's face turned pale. Mirakin calmly explained what forbidden magic and living golems were to her. Last time, it was a cemetery giant, and now it's a living golem? Those Zipful bastards are getting on my nerves. What on earth were they scheming? Mirakin shook his head and spoke to the other two. In any case, this must be the Zipful's handiwork, as you said, since the Colin ruins are in Zipful territory. That's right. You and I need to make some time and visit that area again in the future. I need to go take a look and ask them what they're scheming personally. Jin was somewhat nervous about having to return to the ruins due to the living golems, but since Mirakin was going with him, it would be a much safer trip than his recent mission. And if we're lucky enough, we could even try searching for the mirror, the fountain of mana. Even if we wreak havoc, the Zipfels will have no choice but to sweep it under the rug due to their usage of forbidden magic. Jin nodded to the dragon. Translator's Corner. That's it for this week. Next chapter comes out on Wednesday. It's the beginning of the banquet arc, maybe my favorite arc so far.